Beneath the sky of our ever-changing Earth lie places so strange, so breathtaking, so surreal that they seem to defy logic and even geography itself. In this immersive journey, we travel far beyond the familiar, into the heart of unreal landscapes sculpted by time, mystery, and myth. From mist-shrouded temples perched atop sacred ridges to stone forests that rise like frozen waves from the land, this is a world where nature's artistry meets ancient belief. Here, mountains are not just elevations of stone, they are guardians of legend, vessels of culture, and gateways into the deeper soul of the planet. These places challenge perception. They stir imagination. They feel not just beautiful, but enchanted, as if Earth herself had dreams and sculpted them into being. Welcome to a journey across the most unreal mountains on the planet, where every ridge, every cavern, and every whispering breeze carries the weight of wonder. But before we continue, subscribe to the channel and like the video. Mount Yuelu, known in Chinese as Yuelishan, rises gently on the western edge of Changsha in Hune Province. Its wooded slopes and historical landmarks offering a unique convergence of natural serenity and ancient intellectual spirit. At first glance, the mountain might seem modest in elevation compared to some of China's more imposing peaks, but what it lacks in height, it compensates with an overwhelming sense of cultural depth, atmospheric beauty, and timeless reverence. The mist that often curls around its pine-covered ridges softens the lines between forest, stone, and sky, casting the mountain in an almost mythical hue. This natural phenomenon, combined with its storied past, makes Mount Yuelu an unreal place not because of extreme topography, but because it feels suspended between worlds, the physical and the spiritual, the past and the present. The mountain has been a seat of learning, spirituality, and introspection for centuries. One of its crown jewels is the Yuelu Academy, a relic of Chinese educational heritage founded in 976 AD during the Song dynasty. This institution has remained in continuous operation longer than nearly any other school in the world, eventually evolving into the modern Hune University. Unlike the vast halls and sterile lecture rooms of contemporary academia, Yuelu Academy is a tranquil warren of tiled rooftops, carved wooden eaves, and open-air corridors shaded by ancient trees. Stepping through its gates, you can almost hear the echoes of Confucian scholars debating philosophy or composing poetry beneath the whispering leaves. The smell of old ink still seems to linger in the air, mingling with the scent of pine resin and moist earth. But Mount Yuelu is not merely a bastion of Confucian learning. It is also a landscape steeped in Daoist and Buddhist presence. Temples, shrines, and meditation pavilions dot the mountain's paths, each one seeming to nestle harmoniously into the folds of the terrain. One of the most renowned is the Lushan Temple, a Buddhist sanctuary founded in the Jin dynasty. It sits quietly along a trail thick with camphor trees, its courtyards flanked by stone pagodas and draped in a stillness that feels transported from another age. Here, time feels like it moves more slowly. Monks in ochre robes move between incense smoke and the rhythmic sound of prayer chants, their presence adding to the deeply spiritual atmosphere that coats the landscape like morning dew. The mountain's ecology only enhances this sense of the surreal. Its trails are lined with an astonishing diversity of flora, towering ginkgo trees, maples that turn crimson in the fall, cherry blossoms in the spring, and thick layers of moss that paint the stones with soft, green velvet. Wildlife too makes its quiet appearance. Birds such as the Chinese bulbul and colorful kingfishers flash between the branches, and in the undergrowth, small reptiles sun themselves on old flagstones. Every step on Mount Yuelu feels like a stroll through a living painting. Especially in autumn, when the red and gold leaves fall like rain, the scene becomes a study in tranquility. Each leaf swirling down through shafts of golden light seems to echo the poetry written by generations of visitors before you. Mount Yuelu's network of hiking trails offers something for everyone, from casual walkers to more serious climbers. The most popular path is the winding trail from the base to the Awan Pavilion, an elegant structure originally built in the Tang dynasty, later restored and renamed in honor of Chairman Mao Zedong's famous poem written during his youth here. The pavilion itself overlooks the Xiong River and the city of Changsha. Beyond, providing a viewpoint where the noise of the city feels utterly remote, filtered by the canopy of trees and the presence of antiquity. The view from here offers a fascinating juxtaposition, a modern metropolis stretching into the horizon, seen from a mountaintop still wrapped in the philosophy and atmosphere of ancient China. Night on Mount Yuelu brings another layer of dreamlike charm. As the sun sets and fog begins to gather, lanterns flicker along the paths, casting golden glows against tree trunks and stone walls. The sounds of the city are muffled by distance and forest, replaced by the quiet chirping of cicadas and the soft rustle of bamboo. The entire mountain seems to exhale, releasing the worries of the world into the shadows. This, perhaps, is when Mount Yuelu is at its most unreal, when it becomes less a location and more a feeling, an emotion suspended in the stillness between day and night, between memory and presence. In every sense, Mount Yuelu is a sanctuary, not only for monks and scholars, but for anyone seeking a pause, a breath, a moment to step outside the rush of modern life and into the flow of something older, slower, and wiser. Its misty trails, sacred sites, and centuries-old academies do not merely belong to history books or travel guides. They remain alive, humming quietly beneath each footstep, waiting to be discovered again and again by those who come in search of something both real and beyond the real. Mount Laoshan, perched on the southeastern coast of Shandong province, rises with quiet majesty where the jagged edges of the mountain meet the crashing waves of the Yellow Sea. Just east of the port city of Qingdao, this sacred mountain is not only a geological marvel, its granite peaks forming sharp silhouettes against the sky, but a place where ancient Chinese spirituality, myth, and natural grandeur merge so completely that it feels like a threshold between heaven and earth. The Taoists say that immortals once wandered its ridges, brewing elixirs of life in seaside grottos and conversing with the stars. Whether or not those stories are true hardly matters. When you climb Laoshan's mist-wrapped paths, it becomes clear why people believe them. Few places on Earth hold such an intimate, hypnotic balance between sea, sky, and stone. Laoshan's peaks, numbering over 100, do not soar to extreme heights, with the tallest, Jufeng Peak, reaching 1,132 meters. But it is not altitude that defines this mountain's power. Instead, it is the way it rises so suddenly and completely from the coastline, its stone faces plunging directly into the sea, creating a dramatic verticality that feels almost theatrical. The moment one steps into the Laoshan scenic area, there's a shift. The sea breeze becomes infused with the scent of pine needles and sea salt. Ancient stone steps carved into cliffsides beckon upward toward temples tucked into crags. The wind sings through rock crevices. Clouds drape themselves like veils around the peaks. The entire landscape breathes in patterns far older than any human map, and the visitor is instantly placed into the rhythm of something timeless. Laoshan has been one of the most revered Daoist mountains for more than 2,000 years. According to legend, it was here that the great Daoist master Zhong Daoling, founder of the Way of the Celestial Masters, refined elixirs and meditated in the caves above the sea. Stories abound of immortals who appeared here during thunderstorms or of hidden sages who vanished into mist, never to return. More than just legend, the mountain became a center for spiritual cultivation during the Han Dynasty, and it has remained so ever since. Even today, monks and hermits live in the upper reaches, practicing quiet asceticism in stone huts beneath pine trees older than many civilizations. The mountain isn't just a destination, it's a living spiritual realm, a breathing relic of Chinese metaphysics. Scattered across its terrain are dozens of ancient Daoist temples, some remarkably well preserved, others in states of romantic ruin, their stone walls overtaken by moss and vines. The most prominent of these is the Taiching Palace, dating back over 2,000 years, making it one of the oldest and most important Daoist temples in the country. It isn't a single building but a complex, a serene labyrinth of courtyards, wooden halls, and incense-filled chambers nestled within the folds of the mountainside. The structure reflects the Daoist belief in harmony with nature. Nothing feels imposed. Trees grow through open courtyards. Rocks are not removed, they are built around. The palace's tiled roofs follow the contours of the hills, giving the impression that the architecture grew from the land itself. Inside the Taiching Palace, silence holds dominion. Monks with shaved heads and flowing robes tend incense altars or copy ancient texts by hand. Statues of Laozi and other celestial beings look down with calm detachment from within shadowed alcoves. The scent of sandalwood and old wood permeates everything. In one chamber, a bronze cauldron is said to have been used for brewing the elixir of immortality, a ritual that defined many of the Daoist experiments conducted on this mountain over the centuries. Alchemy, meditation, the cultivation of qi, all of it was centered here, drawn from the belief that Laoshan held unique energetic properties due to its location beside the sea and beneath the stars. Laoshan's Daoist heritage isn't confined to temples. The mountain itself is treated as a kind of holy scripture. Every spring, every cliff, every twisted pine holds symbolic value. The Dragon Cave, for instance, is a narrow, water-carved grotto that descends sharply into the rock near the coastline. It is believed to be a sacred site where the spirit of the Yellow Sea communicates with the mountain. Pilgrims still descend into it, leaving offerings or whispering prayers, their voices echoing softly against the damp, glistening stone. And yet, Mount Laoshan is not solely a place of stillness and reverence. It is vibrantly alive. The interplay of granite, forest, and ocean creates microclimates and ecosystems that seem lifted from myth. Dense woods of pine and cypress cloak the mid-elevations, while the upper ridges give way to bare, wind-sculpted rock. Mountain goats nimbly climb near vertical cliff faces. Hawks and sea eagles circle overhead. Small streams cascade down every slope, fed by springs so pure they have been bottled for generations as Laoshan water, a product that is famous across China and regarded as nearly medicinal. One of the most breathtaking routes on the mountain begins at the foot of Hualu Temple and winds its way along cliffside paths toward Jufeng Peak. Along this trail, walkers pass the Immortal Bridge, a natural stone arch that stretches over a gorge like a frozen ribbon. Beneath it, seawater surges through a narrow chasm, the crashing sound of waves echoing up the cliffs in rhythmic intervals. The path continues past strange granite formations, pillars that resemble sitting monks, smooth domes that resemble sleeping turtles, each one named and given meaning by generations of pilgrims. As you ascend, the trees thin out and the wind picks up, and eventually, the summit appears. Jufeng Peak, a place where on clear days one can see as far as Korea across the shimmering waters of the Yellow Sea. Reaching the top is less a conquest and more a revelation. The ocean stretches like an endless mirror beneath you. Ships look like flecks of dust. The sun casts shifting shadows across the ridgelines. If you're lucky enough to be up there at sunrise or sunset, the sky transforms into a canvas of gold and crimson, the light catching on waves below and clouds above. It's a moment where every breath feels like a prayer, every heartbeat synchronized with the pulse of the earth and the pull of the sea. Beyond its physical beauty and spiritual history, Mount Laoshan also occupies a special place in the literary and philosophical imagination of China. Poets from the Tang and Song dynasties wrote about it in reverent tones, describing its mists as the breath of immortals and its waters as a mirror of the Tao. In modern times, it remains a pilgrimage site not only for religious adherents but for artists, thinkers, and wanderers who come seeking inspiration, solitude, and a reconnect ion with the deep rhythms of the earth. It is a place where time dilates and human ambition shrinks in the face of natural and cosmic scale. But perhaps the most unreal quality of Mount Laoshan is how it manages to be so many things at once. It is a place of rigorous spiritual practice and uncontainable natural freedom. A coastline of roaring waves and cliffs is also a land of whispered prayers and fluttering prayer flags. Its ancient traditions continue undisturbed even as modern travelers arrive with smartphones and hiking gear. It belongs to the present, the past, and perhaps something beyond both. And that is what makes Laoshan not only one of the most beautiful and sacred places in China, but one of the most otherworldly places on the planet. Standing on its sea-swept ledges, listening to the wind and waves, one feels not like a visitor, but like a participant in an ancient ritual that is still unfolding, moment by moment, leaf by leaf, stone by sacred stone. Mount Xiangshan, also known as the Fragrant Hills, lies quietly nestled on the western outskirts of Beijing, where the capital's sprawling urban rhythm begins to fade and the hush of nature takes over. Though not as towering or remote as many of China's other iconic peaks, Mount Xiangshan possesses an ethereal quality that makes it feel as though it belongs to another time, or perhaps even another realm. It is not a wilderness of isolation, but a place saturated with centuries of history, wrapped in seasonal beauty, and marked by the philosophical echoes of emperors, monks, poets, and revolutionaries alike. Its unreal quality emerges not from its remoteness, but from how it transforms across time, light, and memory. How it stands at the edge of China's political and cultural heart, yet holds within it a forested realm of haunting quiet, fiery leaves, and imperial ghosts. Xiangshan derives its name from its distinctive incense burner-shaped peak, Xianglu Feng, which at just over 550 meters is the mountain's highest point. This subtle nod to the sacredness of incense in Chinese ritual culture hints at the mountain's deeper spiritual resonance. But more than anything, it is the shifting color of the forest that defines the Fragrant Hills in the popular imagination. Every autumn, the hills erupt into a blaze of red, orange, and gold as the maple trees turn in unison. During this season, the entire landscape becomes a living oil painting, each trail lit by shafts of amber sunlight and carpeted in dry leaves. The air grows crisp, scented faintly with pine and smoke, and as the breeze carries a rustle through the branches, it sounds almost like whispered voices from a long-vanished dynasty. Locals and travelers alike flock to Xiangshan in this season, and yet despite the crowds, the mountain retains its sense of intimacy. There are always quieter paths and hidden alcoves, places where the only movement is the drifting of leaves, and the only sound is the crunch beneath your feet. Historically, the mountain has served as both retreat and refuge. It became an imperial playground during the Jin and Yuan dynasties, and by the Qing era, it had developed into an extensive garden retreat favored by emperors for both leisure and governance. The most famous of these is the Jingyi Garden, originally built in 1186 and later expanded during the reign of the Qianlong Emperor. Though much of it was destroyed during the upheavals of the 19th and early 20th centuries, first by Anglo-French troops during the Second Opium War, then later during internal conflicts, fragments of its pavilions, corridors, and landscape vistas remain like the bones of a fallen myth. These ruins, half swallowed by moss and tree roots, exude a melancholy beauty, the kind that makes one linger without knowing why. Time seems to move differently here. It doesn't pass, it accumulates. Among the most iconic surviving structures on Mount Xiangshan is the Biyun Temple, or Azure Clouds Temple. Situated high on the slopes, this Buddhist temple complex is an extraordinary blend of architecture, spiritual tradition, and natural setting. Walking through its gates is like entering another realm, one of stillness, soft chanting, and incense smoke that curls like silk into the sky. The temple, originally constructed during the Yuan dynasty, is flanked by steep stone staircases, ancient pine trees, and intricately carved stone lions that seem to guard secrets older than the city below. The temple's most remarkable feature is the Vajra throne pagoda, built to honor the memory of Sun Yat-sen. His body was once housed here before being moved to Nanjing, and the crypt now serves as a solemn museum space, its silence echoing with the weight of modern Chinese history. But perhaps the most evocative site on the mountain is the Shuangqing Villa. Once a private estate, it became the temporary residence of Mao Zedong in the early 1950s. It was here, in these tranquil hillsides, that some of the most significant decisions of the early People's Republic were made. Walking through the villa today, preserved as a historical museum, one finds a stark contrast. Austere furnishings placed against the backdrop of a landscape that is anything but austere. Outside, delicate pavilions perch beside koi ponds. Weeping willows brush the water's edge. The villa's windows look out over hills that blaze with color each October. The place forces contemplation, not just of history, but of its strange collision with natural beauty. How, one wonders, could the weight of revolution coexist so completely with the lightness of falling leaves? Xiangshan's network of trails is vast and winding, connecting historical sites, hidden shrines, and countless viewing points. Some paths are steep and rugged, leading directly up to the summit of Xianglu Feng. Others meander more gently, circling through bamboo groves and terraced gardens. Along the way, visitors encounter ancient stone bridges, crumbling terraces once used for poetry recitals, and resting pavilions where travelers can sit and watch the sun slide across the horizon. The fragrance of the hills shifts as the seasons change. In spring, it is the scent of blooming peonies and fresh earth. In summer, it is damp pine and moss. In autumn, the air smells of dry leaves and distant bonfires. In winter, it is the quiet itself that becomes tangible, the silence of a landscape dusted in snow, waiting for rebirth. Flora and fauna here are modest but meaningful. The forests are home to squirrels, hares, and dozens of bird species. Among them the Chinese bulbul and the crested myna, whose cries echo down the canyons. The occasional fox or hedgehog makes an appearance, and in quiet corners, frogs can be heard near mountain springs. Ancient ginkgo trees stand like golden sentinels at certain temple gates, their leaves raining down like coins of light. And towering above them all are the fragrant cypress and pine trees that give the mountain its name, Xiong, meaning fragrance. Their aromatic needles fill the air with a natural incense, especially after rain, when the mountain seems to exhale and reawaken. But Mount Xiangshan is more than a collage of trees and temples. It is a space of personal transformation. For Beijing residents, it is a sanctuary of respite, a place to breathe deeply and shed the city's ceaseless noise. For spiritual pilgrims, it offers a place of quiet prayer, where the landscape itself seems to listen. For artists and poets, it is a muse. Countless paintings and literary works over the centuries have tried to capture its fleeting light, its layered history, its whispered moods. The mountain invites not domination, but participation. One doesn't conquer Xiangshan. One communes with it. Even today, the fragrant hills remain deeply embedded in Chinese cultural consciousness. Each October, the Red Leaf Festival transforms the area into a pilgrimage site not of religion, but of beauty. Thousands come to watch the forest ignite into crimson and fire orange, to take photos framed by antique pavilions, to sip tea beneath scarlet canopies. And yet even amid this celebration, the mountain retains its deeper silence. It absorbs everything, joy and grief, revolution and retreat, and reflects it back in the quiet curve of a branch, the cool stillness of a pond, the soft crunch of a footstep on a leaf-covered trail. In this way, Mount Xiangshan is unreal not because it defies reality, but because it condenses so much of it, history, art, spirituality, nature, into a single, walkable geography. It reminds the visitor that the world is not always what it seems on the surface. Sometimes the most powerful transformations occur not on remote, towering peaks, but in the places just outside our door, where memory lingers like mist, and every leaf holds a secret. Mount Lushan, or simply Lushan, located in northern Jiangxi province near the city of Zhejiang, is one of the most extraordinary mountains in all of China, not only for its physical grandeur but for the profound cultural, spiritual, and intellectual imprint it has left on Chinese civilization for over 2 millennia. Recognized as a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Lushan is a place where nature does not merely coexist with history and philosophy, it breathes life into them. The mountain is a mosaic of vertiginous cliffs and plunging waterfalls, dense forests and quiet villas, cloud seas and ancient temples. It is a realm where reality and poetry dissolve into one another. Every stone path, every wisp of fog, every echo of water tumbling over rock seems infused with memory, myth, and meaning. The surreal character of Lushan is evident long before one reaches its highest ridges. Even the approach to the mountain is spellbinding. As the road climbs and twists through thick forest, glimpses of granite cliffs appear between pine branches, and the air grows cooler and more fragrant with altitude. Entering the heart of the mountain, known as the Gulling area, feels like stepping into another world entirely. Here, colonial-era villas, mist-shrouded pavilions, and ancient pathways converge amid towering cypress trees and ever-changing weather. Fog creeps through the narrow alleys and gardens, turning even the most ordinary scenes into living ink-wash paintings. The visual poetry of the place is matched only by its cultural legacy. Lushan is a mountain of ideas, having served as a retreat and inspiration for some of China's greatest poets, monks, artists, and political leaders. Geologically, Lushan is unique. It rises sharply from the surrounding plains of the Yangtze River basin, forming a high and rugged plateau that cuts directly into the sky. The mountain range is not just a single peak but a complex, elevated massif encompassing more than 90 peaks above 1,000 meters, the tallest being Hanyang Peak at 1,474 meters. Lushan's cliffs are sheer, often dropping hundreds of meters straight down in jagged slabs. These escarpments, often cloaked in clouds, give Lushan its signature sense of vertical drama. They create sudden, unexpected vistas, an infinite drop between you and the forested valleys below, or a stone arch framing a sea of clouds, with nothing visible but mist and sky. This landscape has birthed dozens of legendary waterfalls, each more dreamlike than the last. Among the most famous is the Sandiquan Waterfall, or Three-Tier Spring, a cascading torrent that plummets 155 meters in 3 distinct drops along a steep cliffside. Watching it tumble into the abyss is both a visual and auditory experience, the roar of the falling water reverberating off the stone walls like thunder from another realm. The poet Li Bai, one of the Tang dynasty's most celebrated writers, was so moved by the sight that he composed his famous lines, "The waterfall hangs high from the river in heaven. It seems to fall straight down 3,000 feet, as if the Milky Way were dropping from the sky." Even after more than 1,000 years, his description feels apparent. The fall, the mist, the impossible height, it truly does resemble a celestial river pouring into the earth. Yet Lushan is not merely a domain of raw, unspoiled nature. It is also a landscape of deep human resonance. Beginning in the Han Dynasty, the mountain became a center for Buddhist and Daoist meditation. Over the centuries, numerous temples and monasteries were built into its crags and hollows. One of the most significant is Donglin Temple, established in the 4th century by the monk Huiyuan, the founder of the Pure Land school of Buddhism. Set on a serene slope wrapped in pine and cypress, the temple is both solemn and ethereal. The sound of temple bells carries far in the mountain air, mingling with birdsong and distant waterfalls. The temple's courtyards, framed by wooden pillars and stone lanterns, are filled with the scent of incense and the quiet murmur of sutra chanting. It is easy to lose time here, absorbed by the deep stillness that permeates every stone, every breath. As time passed, Lushan's spiritual significance broadened to include the cultural and intellectual elite. During the Song and Ming dynasties, the mountain was a favored retreat for scholars, painters, and Confucian philosophers. Their legacy is found in the numerous academies, stele inscriptions, and literary allusions that dot the landscape. Even in modern history, the mountain played a key role. In the 20th century, Lushan became a political nerve center. The nationalist government under Chiang Kai-shek established summer headquarters here, and later, Mao Zedong hosted the famed Lushan conferences that shaped the course of Communist Party policy. The contrast between its natural serenity and its political relevance only adds to its unreal quality. Few mountains can claim to be both a Buddhist sanctuary and a site of national decision-making, but Lushan holds both identities effortlessly within its cloud-strewn ridges. Another surreal feature of Lushan is the Guling town itself, a settlement perched high on the mountain that blends traditional Chinese architecture with European-style villas built during the late Qing and Republican periods. In the early 1900s, Guling became a fashionable summer resort for missionaries, foreign diplomats, and Chinese elites seeking to escape the oppressive heat of the plains below. As a result, the town today is a patchwork of steep lanes, ivy-covered stone walls, and half-hidden gardens. Some buildings have been restored and now serve as guest houses, while others remain abandoned, overtaken by vines and moss, their windows opening onto foggy forests. Wandering through Guling on a misty morning feels like being inside a forgotten novel, one part Gothic, one part Daoist poem. What truly binds all these elements together is Lushan's ever-present fog and its famed cloud seas. On most days, clouds flow through the valleys and rise up the cliffs like slow-moving tides. Peaks appear and disappear as if breathing in and out of existence. Trails are sometimes swallowed whole by mist, only to reappear minutes later bathed in golden sunlight. Viewing platforms such as Wulao Foam, 5 Old Men Peaks, offer a chance to look out over this celestial ocean. If the weather is right, you will see the clouds rolling beneath your feet, lit from above by scattered sunbeams, with distant peaks rising like islands in an endless white sea. This phenomenon is not merely beautiful, it is disorienting, transformative. You lose your sense of scale, of orientation, even of gravity. Time stretches. Silence expands. In those moments, Lushan becomes less a place and more a feeling, elusive, vast, and inexplicably profound. Botanically, the mountain is rich and diverse, hosting more than 3,000 species of plants. Towering evergreens, ancient ginkgos, camellias, azaleas, and rhododendrons fill the landscape, painting it with color and texture across the seasons. In spring, flowers burst into bloom along every path. In summer, the forests grow dense and vibrantly green. Autumn turns the landscape to gold and crimson. Winter shrouds the mountain in a haunting silence, as snow gathers on the railings and temple roofs. Wildlife, too, flourishes here. Birds of every kind flit through the treetops. Foxes and squirrels dart across mossy stones. Even leopards once roamed these slopes, their memory lingering in local legends and carved in temple iconography. Ultimately, what makes Mount Lushan one of the most unreal places on Earth is how completely it transcends categorization. It is sacred and secular, natural and cultural, ancient and modern. It is a place where you can walk in the footsteps of emperors and revolutionaries, meditate where monks once attained enlightenment, or simply lose yourself in a foggy trail where every step feels like a dream. It is a mountain that reveals itself not all at once, but slowly, through layers of mist and time, silence and sound, poetry and stone. Whether you are a pilgrim, a poet, a wanderer, or a seeker of stillness, Lushan does not just meet your expectations, it reshapes them. It shows you a world both real and more than real, solid yet suspended, grounded yet always on the edge of vanishing into the clouds. Mount Jizushan, or Jizu Mountain, rises like a sacred sentinel in the northwestern reaches of Yunnan province, near the Dali Autonomous Prefecture. Revered for centuries as one of the most significant Buddhist mountains in China's southwest, it holds a quiet, transcendent majesty that sets it apart from more traveled spiritual destinations. Unlike the well-known holy mountains of central or eastern China, Jizushan has long stood slightly outside the mainstream gaze. Remote, introspective, and elevated in both geography and atmosphere. It is here, above the sweeping valleys and terraced hills of Yunnan, that sky and mountain embrace in a realm of thin air, ancient chants, prayer flags, and temples painted in vivid hues that stand out like jewels against the stark alpine backdrop. To stand on Jizushan is not merely to visit a mountain, but to journey inward through a spiritual landscape as timeless as the clouds drifting across its peaks. The name Jizu means chicken foot, and the mountain derives its name from the distinctive shape of its ridgelines, sprawling outward in 5 main directions, said to resemble the toes of a chicken's claw. This seemingly whimsical naming hides a deeper symbolic resonance in Buddhist cosmology. According to legend, the mountain was blessed by a footprint of the Buddha himself, and over centuries, it became associated with bodhisattvas and monks seeking enlightenment in isolation. Indeed, Jizushan has often been referred to as the Buddhist Holy Land of southwest China, and for good reason. Over 100 temples, monasteries, pagodas, and meditation grottos once covered its slopes during its golden age in the Tang and Song dynasties. Though many have vanished to time, weather, and war, the spiritual aura remains, undimmed and vividly present in the surviving structures and in the hearts of the pilgrims who still make the arduous ascent. The most celebrated among these surviving structures is the Huayang Temple, nestled on one of the mountain's main ridges at over 3,000 meters above sea level. As one ascends through the thinning air, passing prayer flags fluttering in the wind and stone lanterns half buried in moss, the temple emerges like a vision, its red walls and golden roof tiles glowing beneath the sun or disappearing into morning mists. Inside, monks in deep maroon robes chant sutras, their voices low and rhythmic, echoing across wooden beams darkened by centuries of incense smoke. Candles flicker beside statues of the Buddha and Guanyin, their expressions calm, compassionate, eternal. Outside the temple, old pine trees twist and lean like silent guardians, their branches creaking softly in the breeze. The architectural style here is a fascinating fusion of Han, Bai, and Tibetan influences. Gilded carvings of dragons and lotus blossoms decorate the eaves. Walls are painted in layers of saffron, turquoise, and cobalt blue. Even the floor tiles seem hand-worn by generations of barefoot pilgrims. Each detail reflects both reverence and regional identity, creating a sacred space that belongs fully to its highland context. Along the temple corridors are murals depicting scenes from Buddhist cosmology, celestial beings, enlightened masters, heavenly realms, and the cycle of samsara, all painted in traditional mineral pigments that shimmer faintly in the dim light. This is not just art, it is scripture made visible. But perhaps the most iconic destination on Jizushan is the Golden Summit, Jinding, the mountain's highest point at approximately 3,240 meters. The journey there is both physically demanding and spiritually exhilarating. Pilgrims typically begin at the foot of the mountain near Jinding town, a quiet village that serves as a base camp. From there, they undertake a climb that can last several hours or even days, depending on weather and conditions. The path leads through bamboo groves, fields of wild rhododendrons, and rocky stairways that seem to rise endlessly through swirling fog. On the way, one encounters hidden temples tucked into cliffs, stone cairns left by previous travelers, and occasional hermit huts marked by prayer flags. Even the silence here feels sacred, interrupted only by the call of mountain birds or the soft gurgle of spring water flowing over ancient stones. Reaching the summit is like stepping into another realm. On a clear day, one can see all the way to the snowy peaks of the eastern Himalayas. The view stretches across Yunnan's layered landscape, its rivers, terraces, and rolling green ranges undulating into the distance like a dragon's spine. But what truly makes the summit ethereal is the ocean of clouds that often forms below. At sunrise or sunset, these clouds ignite in gold and crimson, rippling beneath the sky like a sea of fire. Above this celestial expanse stands the Golden Summit Temple, a gleaming structure whose gilded dome catches the first light of dawn, reflecting it in all directions like a divine beacon. Pilgrims light incense here not for show, but from deep devotion. Many have wept quietly upon arrival, overwhelmed not only by the exertion but by the overpowering sense of presence, of peace, of connection to something beyond the self. Jizushan's allure also lies in its spiritual diversity and inclusiveness. While fundamentally a Buddhist mountain, it has long been a meeting place for different faiths and practices. Local Bai and Yi communities view the mountain as sacred as well, incorporating animist rituals into their understanding of its power. In some villages, elders still tell stories of mountain spirits who guard the cliffs, of stars that once descended to the forests below, and of animals who speak in dreams. This rich syncretism, where Buddhism, local folklore, and Daoist elements coexist, gives the mountain an added depth. It is not rigid in its sanctity, it breathes with the belief of all who approach it. The biodiversity of the region only amplifies the feeling that Jizushan is a realm set apart from the ordinary world. Its temperate alpine climate and dramatic elevation gradients create habitats for rare plants, birds, and mammals found nowhere else. In spring and summer, wildflowers explode in bursts of color across the slopes: primulas, gentians, orchids, and lilies. In shaded ravines, moss grows so thick and lush that it muffles sound like a natural carpet. Cloud forests shelter songbirds whose melodies seem tailored for meditation, and the occasional sight of a golden pheasant or a Himalayan civet adds an unexpected thrill to the climb. Even the air feels different: thin, clean, charged with some subtle vitality that invigorates the lungs and quiets the mind. One cannot speak of Jizushan without mentioning the practice of Kora, the circumambulation of the mountain performed by the most devout pilgrims. This sacred circuit, which traces the outer ridgelines and visits multiple temples and shrines, can take days to complete and is often done in silence or while reciting mantras. For many, it is not just a physical journey but a symbolic path of purification and renewal. Each step becomes a prayer, each breath an offering. The mountain becomes a mirror, revealing not only its towering beauty but the inner terrain of the pilgrim's own soul. In a modern world often defined by distraction and disconnection, Mount Jizushan remains a sanctuary of extraordinary clarity. It offers no flashing signs or commercial spectacle. Instead, it offers silence, height, and the immense, echoing presence of centuries of devotion. It stands apart from time, a place where monks still greet the morning sun with chants, where clouds gather in the folds of the earth like robes of the divine, and where every footstep along its ancient paths becomes part of a lineage stretching back through generations of seekers. To ascend Jizushan is not merely to see a mountain, it is to participate in something sacred, something vast and breathing and more enduring than even the granite peaks. In the luminous quiet of its forests, the resonance of its temples, and the impossible beauty of its summits, Jizushan reminds us that the most unreal places on the planet are those that call us not just to witness, but to awaken. Mount Imei, or Immeishan, stands as one of China's 4 sacred Buddhist mountains and a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Its main peak, soaring to 3,099 meters, is a place of legendary significance, crowned by the iconic Golden Summit and famed for its seas of clouds, golden temples, and the elusive Buddha's halo. Yet for all the reverence that surrounds the main pilgrimage route, there exists a lesser-known path, the east ridge of Mount Imei, a forested, mystical spine running along the mountain's flank that few tourists tread. This ridge is not just a geographical alternative, it is a different world entirely. Removed from the well-worn trails and crowds, the East Ridge preserves the mountain's ancient soul, its forgotten temples, whispering pines, crumbling stairways, and the enduring footprints of hermits and seekers long since vanished into the fog. The East Ridge doesn't boast the same overt grandeur of the main summit route, but in many ways, it is more profound. It offers a rare intimacy with the mountain, a hushed and immersive communion with its deeper, quieter rhythms. This region is defined by dense forests, sharp ridgelines, mossy staircases that vanish into foliage, and a heavy, dreamlike mist that seems to never leave. Here, the temples are fewer, often in states of beautiful decay, and the paths are old, worn smooth by the feet of monks, pilgrims, and mountain hermits who once walked these very same stones in search of wisdom, solitude, or transcendence. Unlike the modern cable cars and paved walkways that serve the primary tourist areas, much of the East Ridge is accessible only on foot. The trails are rougher, older, and largely untouched by renovation. Crumbling stone steps snake their way through towering stands of ancient fir, cypress, and cedar. Some trees are so tall and thick with moss that they appear to carry the weight of centuries. Shafts of sunlight pierce the canopy in rare, golden columns, catching motes of mist and the occasional fluttering of leaves. Water trickles endlessly from the cliffs, faint silver ribbons feeding into the mountain's endless chorus of streams and falls. The forest here feels alive in a different sense, not merely biological, but spiritual. Every rustle, every birdsong, every breeze through the leaves carries with it an ancient breath. One of the most evocative aspects of the East Ridge is its connection to the early ascetics of Chinese Buddhism. During the Tang and Song dynasties, monks often came to the ridge seeking escape from the distractions of the world and even the relative bustle of the main temples. Here, they built small hermitages, carved sutras into the stones, and meditated in silence, often for years on end. Many of these sanctuaries still exist, though many more have crumbled into romantic ruins, where one can still find traces of carved Buddha images, old incense holders, or toppled prayer wheels swallowed by ivy. These places exude a timeless stillness. They are not for spectacle. They are for being, for sitting, breathing, and simply being. Perhaps the most well-known structure along the East Ridge is the rarely visited Lei Yin Temple. Tucked deep into a cleft of forest and often overlooked even by regional guides, Lei Yin is a place of utter seclusion. Its name, meaning thunderous sound, seems ironic at first. Its courtyard is wrapped in a stillness so complete that one hears only the wind brushing through bamboo leaves. But in the rainy season, the name becomes clear. Water rushing off the cliffs roars like thunder, reverberating through the valley and giving the temple its powerfully resonant aura. Here, the statues are simple, the offerings humble, bowls of rice, flowers, candles half-burnt and still dripping wax. The monks who reside here speak little and live simply. They sweep the grounds by hand, tend vegetable gardens, and wake at dawn to chant sutras in low, melodic tones that echo through the misty trees like an invocation to the mountain itself. Walking the East Ridge is not merely a physical journey. It is a psychological and spiritual descent into the heart of something older than civilization. There are moments along the trail when the forest closes in, the fog thickens, and the path narrows into nothing more than a track of moss-covered stones. In those moments, it is easy to imagine the world falling away behind you, that you have left behind time itself. Everything slows down, the breath, the heart, the thoughts. You become profoundly aware of each step, each sound, each color of lichen on the rock. In the distance, the call of a black-capped jay or the rhythmic knock of a woodpecker punctuates the silence. Every so often, a break in the trees offers a sweeping view of the valleys below, miles of forested ridges stretching into blue haze, interrupted only by the sinuous glint of a river or the silhouette of a distant pagoda perched on a peak. In these highland forests, flora and fauna abound in complex, overlapping ecosystems. The East Ridge supports a remarkable diversity of life. Giant rhododendrons bloom in wild abundance, painting the undergrowth in pink, white, and purple. Ferns fan out beneath old trees, some older than dynasties. Herbal plants used in traditional medicine grow in hidden pockets, long known to monks and locals. Red pandas are said to traverse these slopes in secret, while macaques can often be spotted moving in quiet troops through the upper branches. Salamanders hide near the mist-fed streams, and in the evenings, glowworms flicker like miniature lanterns near the path. The ecosystem here is not just diverse, it is ancient. And like the spiritual traditions it supports, it has thrived by remaining largely undisturbed. Though the East Ridge is less famous than the Golden Summit route, it shares in Mount Amay's deeper metaphysical significance. Amay is considered the Bodhima, the place of enlightenment, of Samantabhadra, the Bodhisattva of universal virtue. Statues of Samantabhadra riding a six-tusked white elephant can be found at several temples, and his spirit is believed to inhabit the mountain itself. Pilgrims who walk the East Ridge often report sensations of being watched, not by wildlife, but by something larger, more conscious, more serene. It is as if the mountain knows you are there and is watching you back, not in judgment, but in patient presence. To walk its ridge is to enter into a slow dialogue, not of words but of sensation, of temperature, scent, weight, and light. The journey concludes not with grand ceremonies or final summits, but with the simple act of return. Descending the East Ridge, the forest slowly opens, the mist thins, and the distant murmur of modern life returns. And yet, something has shifted. The rhythm of the mountain lingers in the body. The quiet has settled into the bones. The East Ridge, in its humility, its age, and its secret grandeur, has changed you, not loudly, but profoundly. In a world obsessed with spectacle, Mount Amay's East Ridge offers something infinitely rarer: the sacred subtlety of forgotten trails, the sanctity of solitude, and the quiet majesty of nature in its purest, most contemplative form. It is one of the planet's most unreal places, not because it stuns the eye with impossible shapes or colors, but because it transforms the heart through silence, stillness, and the slow unfolding of presence. It reminds us that the most extraordinary places are often not the ones crowded with cameras and acclaim, but the ones walked in solitude, under a canopy of fog and pine, with the soft hush of eternity in your ears. Mount Qingyang, or Qingyangshan, tucked deep within the verdant heartlands of Jiangxi province, emerges not with the grand, sweeping vistas of more towering ranges, but with a quiet, coiled mystery that feels like the echo of a forgotten tale. Revered as a sacred Daoist mountain for centuries, Qingyangshan is a place where natural elegance meets spiritual stillness, a landscape where cliffs rise like calligraphy strokes from the earth, staircases wind through pine groves like dragon tails, and every step leads the seeker further away from the world of men and deeper into the rhythms of the Tao. Its name, Qingyang, meaning clear sun or bright yang, carries a powerful spiritual symbolism in Daoist cosmology, suggesting the pure yang energy that permeates the cosmos, the primal clarity that precedes form. But the mountain's character is anything but blinding or exposed. Instead, it is shaded, coiled, meditative. Where some sacred ranges blaze in grandeur, Qingyangshan whispers in riddles. Its cliffs and crags are not there to be conquered, but to be understood, slowly, intuitively, like verses of an ancient poem. The approach to Mount Qingyang is unassuming, often beginning with narrow country roads that cut through low valleys filled with rice paddies, tea terraces, and bamboo groves. Small hamlets dot the foothills, where locals still maintain traditions passed down through generations. Once on the mountain itself, the world begins to narrow. Wide roads vanish into stone steps, and the trees close in. Moss grows thick over ancient retaining walls, and mist frequently drapes the paths in a gauze of silver. Qingyangshan's stairways are legendary, not because of their scale, but because of how they seem to twist with intention, as if designed not for expedience but for transformation. Each bend, each incline forces the traveler to pause, to adjust their breathing, to recalibrate their attention. The cliffs of Qingyangshan are the mountain's most defining visual element. Massive, smooth rock faces that rise abruptly and unexpectedly, their surfaces etched with natural striations and, in some places, ancient Daoist inscriptions. These inscriptions are not only texts, they are invocations, philosophical meditations, and expressions of cosmic reverence. Carved with patient precision into vertical stone, they appear to defy gravity and time. Some are barely legible now, their characters weathered by rain and wind, but others remain clear, catching sunlight in their grooves as if freshly chiseled. The most famous among them are lines from the Tao Te Ching, the foundational Daoist text attributed to Laozi. The Great Way is formless, flowing everywhere, and nature does not hurry, yet everything is accomplished. Reading them on the cliffside, you feel not like a tourist or even a pilgrim, but like a student standing before the world's oldest teacher, the mountain itself. Temples on Qingyangshan are subtle, often partially hidden by the forest, their architecture modest and aligned with Daoist ideals of harmony and restraint. They do not dominate the landscape but melt into it. Roofs curved like falling leaves, doors worn soft by centuries of hands, courtyards filled with medicinal herbs and aged bonsai trees. One of the most important temples is Qingyang Palace, located near a high ridge flanked by pine-covered cliffs. Its walls are painted in faded red, its tiled roofs streaked with lichen, and its incense burners always warm. Within the inner sanctum, statues of Daoist immortals sit in meditative repose, their faces calm, their expressions knowing. Monks here speak little, moving through rituals with practiced grace. Their chants, soft and rhythmic, seem less like performances than part of the mountain's own breath. What makes Qingyangshan especially unreal is the way it seems to shift according to the weather, the hour, the emotion of the visitor. On misty mornings, the forest trails vanish into white nothingness, leaving you suspended between earth and sky. On clear afternoons, light dapples through pine branches, casting shifting mosaics on the stone paths. At night, with no artificial light, the mountain descends into profound darkness, only the stars above and the distant call of owls reminding you that you are still within the world of form. This atmospheric volatility is not a flaw but a feature, mirroring the Daoist belief in impermanence, change, and the ceaseless flow of qi, the vital energy that connects all things. The biodiversity of Qingyangshan, while not as dramatic as the alpine reserves of Sichuan or Yunnan, is quietly rich. The slopes are covered in pine and cypress, interspersed with groves of camphor and clusters of wild plum. In spring, cherry blossoms and azaleas bloom among the rocks, softening the stone's hardness with bursts of color. Mushrooms grow in the crevices, some luminous in the dusk, others prized by Daoist herbalists for their medicinal properties. Birds are ever present. Magpies, orioles, and woodpeckers punctuate the silence with their songs, while eagles circle far overhead, riding thermals that rise off the cliffs. Foxes, muntjacs, and even the occasional masked civet may be seen slipping through the undergrowth, always just out of reach, as if the mountain itself wishes to remain partially veiled. Legends swirl around Qingyangshan like mist. One tale tells of an immortal who disguised himself as a beggar and wandered the mountain for 1,000 years, testing the hearts of those he met. Another speaks of a sacred spring that reveals truth to those who drink from it at dawn on the winter solstice. These stories are not written in books. They live in the mouths of elderly locals, the murals of shrines, and the whispered conversations of temple caretakers. Every rock, every tree seems to hold a fragment of these tales, waiting for someone attuned enough to hear them. But perhaps Qingyangshan's most compelling feature is its profound alignment with the Daoist notion of wu wei, effortless action, or non-striving. The mountain does not compel, it invites. It does not overwhelm, it enfolds. One can easily spend an entire day here without destination or agenda, simply walking, observing, meditating beside a stream, listening to the breeze sifting through pine needles. In doing so, the mountain reveals its deeper nature, not as a place to be conquered or consumed, but as a process, a presence, a living embodiment of the Tao. Time stretches here, not endlessly, but gracefully. Hours pass like minutes. One's thoughts slow. The need to explain, to define, to plan, all of it dissipates into the soft hum of insects and the rustle of bamboo. In this way, Mount Qingyang is not only unreal in its aesthetics or atmosphere. It is unreal in how it teaches without teaching, how it transforms without force. It reflects the visitor back to themselves, not through mirrors or visions, but through the quiet, insistent wisdom of its stones, trees, and winds. It is a mountain of knowing, but not knowledge, of being, but not stillness, of silence that sings. Few ever reach the topmost ridges. Fewer still trace every staircase or decode every inscription. But those who have walked even a little of Qingyangshan carry something back with them that is hard to name. A deeper breath, a quieter heart, a sharper awareness of the spaces between thoughts. And long after they have left, the mountain remains, not just as a place on a map, but as an echo in the soul, reminding them that the path is not always forward, nor upward, but inward. Mount Qianmu, or Qianmushan, nestled in the verdant folds of western Zhejiang province, is a sanctuary of towering ancient trees, whispering bamboo groves, and elusive, almost mythical biodiversity. Its name, Qianmu, meaning heaven's eye, is drawn from the celestial pools that crown its twin peaks, East Qianmu and West Qianmu. These twin summits, one rising to about 1,506 meters and the other slightly lower, are said to hold water year-round, like eyes gazing up at the heavens. But beyond poetic naming, Mount Qianmu is one of the most extraordinary ecological realms in eastern China, a living relic of primordial forest, where nature reigns with little compromise, and where every moss-covered stone and mist-draped branch seems to pulse with the memory of ancient earth. From the moment one enters the mountain's lower reaches, the landscape begins to shift. The air thickens, not unpleasantly, but richly, with the scent of loam, sap, and moisture. Light filters through broadleaf canopies in shafts of green and gold, illuminating the gentle sway of ferns and bamboo. The terrain is steep but not harsh, the kind of climb that invites contemplation rather than conquest. Stone steps climb patiently along streams that gurgle over smooth rocks, and the forest encloses the traveler with a hushed embrace. Here, the silence is not empty but resonant, a deep, forested stillness occasionally broken by the call of a pheasant or the splash of a frog leaping into an unseen pool. Qianmushan is not just a mountain, it is a cradle of life. It has been designated a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve due to its staggering biodiversity and pristine ecosystems. The mountain is home to thousands of plant species, including several that have vanished elsewhere. Among the most sacred inhabitants are its ancient ginkgo trees, some of which are estimated to be over 1,000 years old. Their knotted trunks, immense and gnarled, rise from the forest floor like the legs of some slow-moving earth titan. These ginkgos are more than just trees. They are monuments to endurance, to patience, to stillness. Locals and pilgrims alike often pause in their shade, touching the bark in reverence, making quiet wishes or offerings of incense. In addition to ginkgos, the mountain harbors stands of towering firs, cryptomeria, and camphor trees, many of them centuries old. Some grow so tall and straight that the sky disappears into their crowns, turning paths into green-lit tunnels of cathedral-like grandeur. Interwoven among these are dense groves of moso bamboo, which rustle in the wind with a rhythm like breathing. During certain seasons, the forest floor bursts into sudden color. Azaleas, magnolias, and wild orchids blooming beneath the canopy in vibrant, ephemeral waves. The combination of elevation, moisture, and isolation has made Tianmushan a refuge for plant life that exists nowhere else, and botanists from around the world have come here to study its flora. But Mount Tianmu's most elusive treasure may be its animal life. The forest is said to be one of the last strongholds of the South China tiger, though actual sightings are now rare to the point of mythical. More frequently observed are golden pheasants, masked palm civets, flying squirrels, and muntjac deer, their delicate hooves barely audible on the damp earth. Birdsong is constant, a fluctuating symphony of warblers, thrushes, and woodpeckers echoing through the valleys. At night, the calls of owls and frogs create a soundscape that seems untouched by time. And perhaps most remarkably, Tianmushan is home to the Chinese giant salamander, the world's largest amphibian, which lurks in its cool, unpolluted streams and deep, mossy caves. Thought to be a living fossil, unchanged for millions of years, this creature represents the mountain's deeper truth. It is not merely scenic, it is prime val. The cultural history of Tianmushan is equally compelling. For centuries, it has been a destination for monks, poets, philosophers, and recluses seeking communion with nature and the Tao. Several secluded temples lie scattered across the mountain, their walls faded by rain and time. These temples are not grand in scale, but rather modest, humble spaces of worship that blend seamlessly into the environment. Their courtyards are often ringed by aged trees, with stone benches for meditation and winding paths that disappear into the mist. Incense coils hang from wooden beams, their smoke curling upward like prayers written in air. Monks here tend not to proselytize or engage with outsiders unless spoken to. They live in harmony with the mountain's rhythm, rising with the sun, meditating with the wind, chanting softly with the flow of the streams. The most renowned among these is the Shenqian Temple, dedicated to Zhanwu, the Daoist deity often associated with water, storms, and the northern direction. This temple, perched on a high saddle between the peaks, offers a view both breathtaking and humbling. From its balconies, one can watch the clouds sweep in and out of the valleys like drifting spirits, or see the sunlight break through the forest canopy in radiant beams. Pilgrims climb to this temple not in hopes of miracles, but in search of clarity, of silence, of alignment with something more enduring than the distractions of ordinary life. A defining feature of Tianmushan's unreal atmosphere is its shifting weather. Mist is a near-constant companion, rising from the valleys in ghostly tendrils, cloaking trees in pearl-grey silence, and turning distant peaks into silhouettes of suggestion rather than certainty. Rain falls softly but persistently, feeding the forest with life. On rare clear days, the sky reveals itself with sudden intensity, blue and impossibly vast above the jade waves of treetops. But it's the fog that defines Tianmu. In that fog, the mountain reveals its spirit, not as a place to be photographed or catalogued, but to be experienced in breath and stillness, where vision narrows and the inner world becomes clearer. The mountain is also laced with ancient trails, some carved directly into rock, others laid in cobblestone or wood, many of them once walked by imperial envoys, wandering Daoist sages, or tea merchants moving between distant villages. These trails are not straight. They meander, offering frequent moments of pause, small shrines by a waterfall, rest pavilions perched at scenic overlooks, stone bridges that span narrow, rushing creeks. Walking them is not a means to an end, but a ritual in itself. Every turn reveals a new perspective, a sudden opening in the forest canopy, a mossy rock shaped like a crouching tiger, a long-forgotten inscription worn almost smooth by time. Indeed, Time seems to operate differently on Tianmushan. It does not flow, but lingers, gathering in the hollows of tree trunks, in the pools of rainwater collecting on stone tablets, in the hush that precedes a bird's call. One does not come to Mount Tianmu for conquest or spectacle, but for quiet transformation. It does not proclaim itself loudly. Its magic is subtle, slow-building, and deeply internal. After hours, or days, spent among its winding paths and breathing woods, visitors often find that their senses are heightened, their minds softened, their awareness shifted. You leave Tianmushan not with memories, but with imprints. The local culture around the mountain reflects this same harmony. Nearby villages like Chiyu and Dashi still uphold ancient festivals tied to seasonal changes and mountain deities. Elders practice traditional medicine using herbs found only in the higher reaches. Mountain songs are passed down in soft lilting dialects, and tea grown on the lower slopes is said to carry the flavor of mist and pine. Mount Tianmu may not dominate the skyline like Himalayan giants, nor erupt with dramatic cliffs like Zhangjiajie, but it exists in another realm entirely, one of mystery, biological wonder, and spiritual resonance. It is a place where heaven and earth meet not in thunder, but in dew. A mountain whose power lies not in height, but in depth, not in what it shows you, but in what it allows you to feel. Here, you do not find the unreal by chasing it. You discover it by slowing down, by listening, by simply being still beneath the ancient trees and the sky's watching eye. Mount Wuji, also known as the Five-Finger Mountain, stands as the majestic heart of Hainan Island. Its tallest and most sacred peak, rising to an elevation of 1,867 meters. Its 5 jagged summits rise like the outstretched fingers of a colossal hand, giving it not only its name but also a mythic silhouette against the southern sky. Towering over a landscape of dense tropical rainforest, cascading rivers, and ethereal clouds, Wuji is not merely a geological marvel, it is a cultural and spiritual axis around which the island's indigenous identity revolves. To ascend Mount Wuji is to enter a realm where time collapses, nature becomes myth, and every stone, tree, and breath of mist seems steeped in ancient meaning. Located in central Hainan, far from the glitz of coastal resorts, Wuji is as wild as it is sacred. The mountain dominates the surrounding topography, rising steeply from the green-cloaked valleys that ripple outward like waves from its base. Unlike the more manicured sacred mountains of the mainland, Wuji remains largely untamed. Its ridges covered in thick jungle, its trails often muddy and treacherous, and its weather capricious, shifting from blinding sun to sudden rain in a heartbeat. This elemental volatility gives Wuji its raw power. It's not a mountain that invites easy access. It demands effort, respect, and a willingness to surrender to its rhythms. The 5 jagged peaks that define the mountain are more than natural formations. They are symbols, storied and revered. Local legends say that the fingers represent 5 powerful mountain spirits, each guarding a different realm of life: water, fire, wood, metal, and earth. Others claim they are the petrified fingers of a celestial being who tried to grasp the heavens and was turned to stone for his hubris. The highest of these fingers is extremely difficult to summit, its sheer cliffs and dense vegetation making it accessible only to the most experienced climbers. But even from the valleys below, the 5 peaks are visible, often wreathed in mist, standing like ancient sentinels watching over the island's soul. One cannot speak of Wuji without honoring its deep connection to Hainan's indigenous peoples, especially the Li and Miao ethnic groups who have inhabited the region for thousands of years. For the Li people, Wuji is not just a mountain. It is a living ancestor, a divine protector, and a sacred center of their cosmology. Oral traditions passed down through generations speak of gods descending on its slopes, of ancestral heroes who drew strength from its rivers, and of ceremonies performed on its ridges under full moons. Even today, the Li people revere Wuji as a holy place, making offerings at hidden shrines and performing dances in its honor during festivals. The cultural life that surrounds Wuji is as vibrant as the rainforest that cloaks it. In nearby villages, homes are constructed from bamboo and thatch, and traditional crafts, such as Li brocade weaving and tattooing, are still practiced with reverence. Songs and stories tell of the mountain's moods, its anger expressed through storms, its joy through blooming orchids, its sorrow through morning fogs. It is not uncommon to hear elders speak of dreams where Wuji appears as a guiding presence, offering warnings or blessings depending on one's conduct. This animistic reverence is woven into every aspect of life, from agriculture to storytelling, from childbirth to burial rites. Ecologically, Mount Wuxi is one of the richest and most biologically diverse environments in all of China. Its rainforest is a tropical treasure trove, home to hundreds of rare and endemic species. Towering dipterocarps, strangler figs, and ancient banyan trees form the forest canopy, while beneath, an underworld of mosses, orchids, and ferns thrives in perpetual shadow. The air is thick with humidity and scent, of damp earth, of flowering vines, of unseen life in every direction. This lush chaos is alive with sound, cicadas in crescendos, birds calling across valleys, frogs singing from hidden pools, and the constant murmur of water dripping from leaves or tumbling over stone. Animal life here is just as extraordinary. The elusive Hainan black-crested gibbon, one of the world's rarest primates, clings to the last vestiges of this habitat, its haunting call echoing through the canopy at dawn. Giant butterflies with wings like stained glass flit through the light shafts. Tree frogs in iridescent greens and golds cling to bark as still as statues. Occasionally, the deeper trails reveal signs of clouded leopards or wild boar, footprints, scat, a rustle in the brush. Every rustling branch feels significant here, every shadow a potential glimpse of something unknown. To walk through Wuxi's forest is to feel deeply watched, not ominously, but with the sense that nature is fully aware of your presence. One of the most iconic routes up Wuxi begins near the village of Shuiman, winding steeply through dense forest and over slippery rocks. The path is a test of endurance, winding up slopes that grow ever steeper and more overgrown. In places, wooden ladders and ropes aid the ascent, though even these are often slick with moss or worn thin by use. There are no grand pavilions or cable cars here, only crude handrails, handmade trail markers, and the occasional clearing where the valley spills into view below. At every turn, the 5 jagged peaks appear closer, more defined, more impossible. For most hikers, reaching even one of the fingers is a formidable accomplishment. But the real reward isn't the summit, it's the journey itself. Every hour brings changes in vegetation, in light, in atmosphere. The mountain shifts as you climb, revealing and hiding itself like a living being. There are sacred pools on the mountain, still, clear waters fed by underground springs and shielded by thickets of bamboo. Some believe these pools are mirrors of the mountain's own soul, and that gazing into them in silence reveals truths about the self. Others say that to drink from them after a long hike is to gain blessings of health and clarity. Whether literal or metaphorical, these pools add to Wuxi's sense of sacredness, of elemental power. Their waters are cold, mineral-rich, and said to never dry, even in the height of dry season. Unlike other sacred mountains in China that are associated predominantly with Taoism or Buddhism, Wuxi is a place of indigenous spirituality, a reminder of China's vast and diverse cultural mosaic. Though Buddhist and Daoist monks have occasionally visited the region, and a few shrines exist in remote corners of the mountain, Wuxi has remained largely under the spiritual guardianship of the Li people. Their cosmology, rooted in nature worship and ancestral reverence, fits the mountain's wild and untamed spirit. This is not a place for formal temples and sutra chanting, but for firelight ceremonies, ancestral songs, and the quiet respect of those who see the divine in stone, rain, and fern. Today, efforts are underway to preserve both Wuxi's ecological integrity and its cultural traditions. Parts of the mountain fall within the Wuxishan National Nature Reserve, and conservationists are working to protect the endangered species that depend on its rainforest. At the same time, cultural preservation groups are supporting the revitalization of Li language and traditions, ensuring that the sacred stories of Wuxi do not vanish into silence. Tourism, still modest compared to China's more famous peaks, is carefully managed, with limits placed on development and visitor numbers. This delicate balance between accessibility and preservation is vital, because Wuxi's magic lies precisely in its mystery, its wildness, and its rootedness in something older and deeper than modern time. To visit Mount Wuxi is to experience a different kind of sacred geography, one that does not conform to neat categories or polished narratives. It is a place where myth and ecology merge, where indigenous knowledge survives in breath and memory, where every leaf glistening with rain, every crag wrapped in cloud, every twisting route along the trail tells a story older than history. In a world of curated experiences and filtered landscapes, Wuxi offers something rare and real, the sublime on its own terms. It is one of the most unreal places on the planet, not because it looks like a fantasy, but because it feels like a memory from a world more alive than this one, a world where the mountain is not a backdrop, but a teacher, a god, a living text written in stone and green and cloud. Mount Lianhua, or Lotus Mountain, rises from the southern expanse of Guangdong province like a natural sculpture shaped by ancient winds and timeless patience. Located near the booming city of Guangzhou, this mountain is not a vast wilderness or an untamed frontier like some of China's other sacred peaks. But what it lacks in scale, it more than compensates for in symbolism, serenity, and its poetic, almost otherworldly form. With its distinct lotus-shaped profile, crimson-hued cliffs, and strategic position overlooking the Pearl River Delta, Mount Lianhua offers a unique fusion of natural wonder, historical depth, and spiritual resonance. Despite its relatively modest height, only about 108 meters above sea level, Mount Lianhua feels much larger than it is. It rises directly from the flat alluvial lands south of Guangzhou, meaning even a gentle ascent quickly reveals sweeping, panoramic views of cityscapes, rivers, and distant ridges. And unlike many mountains whose majesty is derived from their remoteness, Lianhua's power comes from its intimacy. It is a mountain of closeness, a place where earth and sky meet in gentle balance, where nature and civilization breathe the same air, and where the divine is not in isolation, but in integration. The most striking feature of Mount Lianhua is its form. Viewed from certain angles, especially from the southern approach by river or road, the mountain appears like a lotus flower in bloom, its rounded peaks like unfurling petals. This resemblance is no accident in the eyes of locals or pilgrims. In Chinese cosmology, the lotus is more than just a plant. It is a profound symbol of purity, enlightenment, and spiritual transcendence. It grows from the mud yet emerges clean and beautiful, untouched by the impurity of its roots. The mountain, likewise, rises from the fertile plain, a landscape of cities, factories, roads, and daily life, yet lifts itself above with an air of spiritual grace and timeless calm. This spiritual identity is deeply embedded in the mountain's cultural heritage. At the base of the mountain stands the historic Lotus Mountain Temple, originally built during the Tang dynasty and rebuilt several times since. Its weathered eaves, fragrant incense coils, and ornate wood carvings speak to centuries of devotion. Within its halls, statues of Guanyin, the Bodhisattva of compassion, stand serene beneath hanging lotus lanterns. Pilgrims light incense and bow in silent reverence, asking for blessings of peace, clarity, and healing. The temple gardens are filled with flowering lotus ponds, their blossoms reflecting in the still waters like glimpses into a deeper, dreamlike world. On quiet mornings, mist rises from these ponds, and the entire temple seems to float in a realm somewhere between heaven and earth. Climbing the mountain is an experience rooted not in exertion, but in reflection. Stone steps wind gently through lush subtropical vegetation, camphor trees, mango groves, bougainvillea, and thick bamboo thickets. Along the way, one encounters ancient stone tablets carved with poems and aphorisms, many from Ming and Qing dynasty scholars who came here seeking solitude and inspiration. These stone inscriptions, worn by time but still legible, give the mountain a voice, a whispering presence that recounts centuries of contemplation. Pavilions offer shaded places to rest and admire the scenery, their names poetic and evocative: Fragrant Cloud Pavilion, Moon Mirror Terrace, Echoing Lotus Hall. Each name captures not just a location, but a mood, a vibration of the mountain's spirit. What truly elevates Lianhua into the realm of the unreal is the view from its summit. From the lotus-like crown, one can gaze across the entire Pearl River Delta, a sprawling mosaic of rivers, lakes, villages, skyscrapers, and green pockets of parkland. At sunrise, the waters below turn to molten gold, while the mist clings to the riverbanks like drifting silk. At dusk, the city begins to sparkle, and the mountain becomes an island of calm in a sea of urban motion. This juxtaposition, between sacred stillness and metropolitan dynamism, is Lianhua's signature paradox. It is a place where one can stand in silence, hear the distant hum of the city below, and yet feel as though they are 1,000 miles removed from it all. Lianhua also holds historical weight. During the Ming dynasty, the mountain served not only as a spiritual retreat but as a coastal fortification site. The Lotus Mountain Fortress, a relic of this era, still stands on one side of the slope, its stone walls weathered by centuries of sun, rain, and salt air. Built to defend against pirates and foreign incursions, it's now a place of echoes and shadows, where cannons sit rusted and walls are softened by vines. The military past adds another layer to the mountain's identity, It has not only been a site of peace and poetry, but also one of vigilance and protection. Seasonal festivals bring the mountain to life in dazzling, almost theatrical ways. During the Lotus Festival in summer, the entire mountain and temple grounds are adorned with lanterns, flowers, and ceremonial decorations. Devotees perform rituals, monks chant in procession, and families picnic beneath the blossoming trees. In spring, the mountain is blanketed in azaleas and peonies, while in autumn, it becomes a sea of red and gold as the deciduous trees flare with color. The air is filled with the smell of incense, roasted chestnuts, and the crisp fragrance of fallen leaves. These are not just aesthetic spectacles, they are moments when the community comes together to honor the mountain as a living part of their collective spirit. And yet, for all its accessibility, Mount Lianhua retains a certain secrecy. There are quiet corners rarely visited, hidden grottos, side trails that vanish into bamboo, forgotten shrines overgrown with moss. These places do not reveal themselves to everyone. They appear to those who move slowly, who listen. In one such hidden spot near the mountain's eastern face is a natural rock formation known locally as Sleeping Buddha Stone. Lain back in the shade, it resembles the outline of a reclining Buddha, serene, eternal, worn smooth by time. Nearby is a small spring, its waters collected in a hollow stone basin. Locals say it never dries, even in drought years. The spring is unmarked, unnamed, and nearly invisible unless you know where to look. Yet it is these subtle, sacred details that give Lianhua its true depth. In an age of constant motion, Mount Lianhua offers something precious: pause. It does not overwhelm with scale, nor dazzle with extremes. Its beauty is quiet, deliberate, and continuous, like the unfurling of a lotus petal in slow time. It asks nothing of the visitor except presence. And in return, it offers a sanctuary where city noise fades, where the heart slows, and where the invisible threads connecting nature, culture, and spirit become suddenly, luminously clear. What makes Mount Lianhua one of the planet's most unreal places is not its isolation from civilization, but its harmony with it. It is proof that the sacred can bloom amid the modern, that stillness can survive in motion, and that even within reach of neon lights and roaring traffic, there exists a place where the ancient lotus still blossoms, quietly, persistently, and beautifully. Mount Yunwu, literally Cloud and Mist Mountain, in Guangxi Province is one of China's most enigmatic natural sanctuaries, a landscape where mystery is not just a feature, but the very essence of the place. Located deep within the karst country of southern China, far from the well-trodden tourist trails, Mount Yunwu lives up to its evocative name in every possible sense. Cloaked in perpetual fog, scattered with jade-colored waterfalls, and riddled with cave systems that plunge into the earth like forgotten passages to an underworld, it is a mountain that feels alive, breathing in clouds, exhaling silence. Unlike dramatic, craggy ranges that scream their presence, Yunwu whispers. Its power lies not in height, though it is still imposing at over 1,300 meters, but in mood, in atmosphere, in a kind of organic myth that clings to every rock and root. Travelers who ascend its mossy paths often report feeling as though they've stepped into a forgotten world, one untouched by time or logic. Visibility is rarely more than a few meters. Vines curl around trees like ancient scripts. The sound of rushing water comes from every direction, yet the source remains hidden in mist. It's a place where senses sharpen and the boundary between the physical and the spiritual blurs. Yunwu's forests are dense and lush, a humid tangle of evergreens, broadleaf trees, and subtropical undergrowth. The moisture-laden air supports an explosion of biodiversity. Orchids bloom on tree trunks, their petals gleaming like polished jade. Moss carpets every surface, glowing electric green beneath the filtered sunlight. Bamboo stalks creak gently in the wind. Ferns, some taller than a man, sway as if reacting to your presence. The deeper you go, the quieter the world becomes, until the only sounds are your breath and the rhythmic drip of water falling from leaf to soil. Then come the waterfalls. Mount Yunwu is famous for its countless waterfalls, ranging from thin silver threads that descend from unseen cliffs to massive torrents that roar down black rock walls, creating their own miniature weather systems. The most famous among them is Dragon Veil Waterfall, a towering cascade that plunges nearly 100 meters in a series of veils and bursts, always partially obscured by rising mist. Legend says it is guarded by a dragon spirit, and those who bathe in its lower pool during the Ghost Festival may receive visions or warnings from the spirit realm. The waterfall's approach is deliberately obscured by jungle and mist. One hears it long before it's seen, and then only glimpses it through gaps in foliage, as if it exists half in this world and half in some parallel reality. And then there are the caves. Mount Yunwu is laced with karst caves, some mapped, most not. The limestone foundation has been slowly hollowed by time and water, forming chambers of staggering beauty and eerie silence. The most famous, Mist Shadow Cavern, is a subterranean cathedral stretching for several kilometers into the mountain's belly. Stalactites and stalagmites rise like the pillars of forgotten temples, their surfaces slick with condensation and minerals that shimmer in lamplight. Underground lakes reflect them so perfectly that it becomes difficult to tell where the world ends and its mirror begins. Strange winds moan through tunnels. In some places, ancient offerings have been found: ceramic bowls, rusted knives, red threads tied to rocky outcroppings, suggesting that these caves have long been viewed as sacred or taboo. Locals speak of hermits who vanished into the caverns, never to return, becoming part of the mountain's dreaming soul. Indeed, Mount Yunwu's spiritual legacy is just as thick as its mist. This has long been a mountain of pilgrims, seekers, and wanderers who sought visions rather than enlightenment, mystery rather than clarity. There is no grand monastery here, no sprawling complex of pagodas. Instead, hidden among the trees are small shrines and meditation huts, some abandoned, others still tended by solitary monks who have chosen a life of stillness. One such site is the Shrine of the Hidden Moon, a humble stone structure carved into the side of a cliff, accessible only by a near-vertical stairway carved into the rock. It's said that the shrine's single statue, a seated figure cloaked in moss and shadow, is so lifelike that it sometimes blinks in the fog. The mountain is also steeped in local legends. One of the most enduring is the tale of the Mist Bride, a spectral woman in white who appears to lone travelers at dusk, offering them tea or guidance, only to vanish when they look away. Some say she was a real woman who died searching for her husband in the mists. Others claim she is the spirit of the mountain itself, testing the hearts of visitors. Another legend speaks of the Dream Pool, a small basin of water that only reveals itself under moonlight. Those who gaze into it are shown a glimpse of their past life or their future death, but never both. Even the air feels enchanted. The combination of elevation, humidity, and plant oils gives the atmosphere a peculiar quality: thick, fragrant, and oddly calming. In the early morning, as the sun rises and light begins to filter through the mist, everything is bathed in soft amber and blue hues. Trees appear as silhouettes, and spiderwebs strung between branches catch the dew, glittering like constellations. You feel as if you are walking not in space, but through time itself, somewhere between the past and the present, where the veil between worlds is thinnest. The people who live around Mount Yunwu understand its nature well. In villages like Xiangshan and Wuping, elders speak of the mountain with a mixture of awe and fear. They leave offerings of fruit and incense at certain trailheads, especially before long treks. Local healers collect rare herbs from its slopes, plants said to bloom only in the mountain's fog, and use them in medicines that treat both physical and spiritual afflictions. Traditional music often mimics the sounds of the mountain: slow, winding flute melodies like drifting mist, sudden drumbeats like falling stones. During festivals, dancers wear white and silver garments embroidered with clouds and waves, performing movements meant to imitate the shifting moods of Yunwu. Modern development has only barely touched this place. Though a few ecotourism paths and ranger stations exist, most of Mount Yunwu remains inaccessible, preserved by geography and reverence. Researchers come to study its rare plant life, spelunkers to explore its endless caves, spiritual seekers to meditate in its stillness, but the mountain does not yield itself easily. Those who come expecting spectacle may leave disappointed. Those who come with patience, however, are often changed. There is something fundamentally unreal about a place like Mount Yunwu. Not because it glows or levitates or appears in ancient scrolls, though all of those things are whispered about, but because it stands so completely apart from the logic of the everyday world. It is a space where emotion and environment intertwine, where the landscape itself seems to possess a consciousness, a memory of ages past. It doesn't merely resist being tamed, it makes you question the very idea of taming. It asks nothing, but it reveals much. Mount Yunwu is not a mountain you summit, it is a mountain you enter. You enter it as one might enter a story, or a dream, or a place remembered from long ago but never actually visited. And when you leave, a part of it lingers, not as a visual memory, but as a sensation, a vapor in the chest, a hush behind the thoughts. In a world that increasingly demands clarity and speed, Yunwu remains defiantly obscure and slow, a mountain that teaches through silence, through fog, through the poetry of what cannot be named. Mount Zhohua, one of China's 4 sacred Buddhist mountains, is well known for its golden roof temples, bustling pilgrimages, and legendary association with Kittigaba Bodhisattva, Dzong Puza, the guardian of the underworld. But what most visitors never see, what remains hidden behind the incense smoke, the tour buses, and the densely packed monastic compounds, is the remote, ethereal wilderness of the Zhohua Back Ridge. This quieter, less-traveled realm unfolds like a whispered prayer beyond the main pilgrimage circuits, a world of muted light, moss-laden stones, craggy ridgelines, and solitary hermitages clinging to the edge of cloud-wrapped cliffs. The Back Ridge, also known in Chinese as Zhohua Howling, is the mountainous rear portion of the Greater Zhohua Massif in Anhui Province. While the main southern slopes welcome thousands of pilgrims to sites like the Huacheng Temple and the Body Hall, the Back Ridge feels like a different mountain entirely. It is where the sacred begins to dissolve into the sublime, where structures give way to stone, and ceremony yields to stillness. With its winding, rugged paths, thick bamboo forests, and high-altitude solitude, the Back Ridge invites not worship so much as contemplation, drawing a thinner line between spiritual pursuit and raw nature. Reaching the Back Ridge requires intention. The paths are long and often steep, composed of centuries-worn stone steps that disappear into dense foliage. There are no tour guides here, no souvenir stalls or temple markets. You climb with the sound of wind in the trees, with the murmurs of distant streams, and with the occasional flutter of a bird taking flight from its hidden perch. The air is cooler, cleaner, and often saturated with moisture. Mornings bring a curtain of mist that lifts slowly, revealing glimpses of deep valleys and distant peaks whose names have been passed down in poems, sutras, and forgotten travelers' journals. It is said that in the Back Ridge, every tree has its own rhythm, and every bend in the path holds a secret. The terrain is more rugged here, the vegetation older and more untouched. Ancient pines lean into the wind like elderly monks in robes. Ferns unfurl beside quiet mountain springs. Wild orchids, delicate and rare, bloom in the shadows beneath cliffs. Crumbling stone lanterns and weathered prayer tablets lie half-swallowed by vines, their inscriptions softened by decades of rain and fog. Everything here feels quieter, not silent, but imbued with a reverent hush, as if the mountain itself is deep in meditation. The most powerful presence in the Back Ridge is not a building or a statue, it is the mountain itself. Unlike the more frequented temple complexes, where the divine is framed by architecture and ritual, here the sacred is found in the raw interplay of sky, stone, and wind. The ridgelines are narrow and sharp, occasionally offering stunning vistas over layered valleys shrouded in shifting mist. These views are not grand in the tourist sense, they do not present themselves for your approval. Rather, they emerge briefly between clouds, soft and elusive, like visions glimpsed in a dream or during deep meditation. Scattered along the Back Ridge are small, rarely visited hermitages, some active, some long abandoned. These simple stone or wood dwellings sit perched on rocky outcrops or nestled into quiet hollows. Many are no larger than a single room. They are often marked only by faded prayer flags, a faint scent of incense, or the sound of chanting drifting on the breeze. Here, solitary monks or nuns have lived, and still live, following austere practices of meditation, scripture recitation, and silence. These hermitages are not listed on maps. They are not built for pilgrims. They are built for disappearance. One such site is the Wujin and Five Golden Hermitage, a tiny structure built into a rock alcove beneath an overhanging cliff. Its name comes from a story told among the monastics, that 5 monks once lived there in perfect harmony, never speaking, and when they passed away, 5 golden lotuses bloomed from their ashes. Whether fact or legend, the place carries a deep, unsettling peace. It is said that staying overnight there brings lucid dreams of past lives and karmic echoes. Further along the ridge lies the Stone Bell Cliff, a natural rock wall that, when struck, rings with a bell-like tone said to echo through the valleys. Some claim the sound can only be heard at dawn. Others believe it's the voice of the mountain responding to sincere prayers. The cliff is adorned with ancient graffiti, carvings left by monks, scholars, and seekers over hundreds of years. Characters for emptiness, eternity, and compassion appear beside more cryptic symbols and verses. Lichen has grown over many, creating a layered palimpsest of spiritual longing. Another ethereal landmark is the Cave of Listening Silence. Hidden down a steep, treacherous descent from a high ridge, this small natural cave is known for its extraordinary acoustics. Inside, even a whisper echoes with perfect clarity. Hermits have used the cave for centuries as a meditation chamber, where the sound of their breath becomes a mantra. It is said that one's heartbeat becomes audible in the stillness. Some visitors report hearing voices, not in madness, but as gentle impressions from beyond the veil of ordinary awareness. Animals, too, move differently in the back ridge. With fewer people to disturb them, the forests are alive with rare birds, wild goats, and even the occasional golden monkey. Butterflies drift like thoughts through the underbrush. The soundscape is orchestral: wind in pine needles, water over rock, the sudden cry of a hawk, the steady creak of bamboo. These natural rhythms align with the inner quiet of the traveler. One begins to notice not only the external beauty, but the vastness of inner stillness echoing it. And yet, for all its wildness, the back ridge is still firmly within the spiritual orbit of Mount Johor's greater Buddhist tradition. Small stone stupas and buried pagodas dot the landscape, some crumbled and covered in moss. These are the graves or reliquaries of monks who once lived and died here in pursuit of ultimate compassion. One such site, barely marked, is believed to house the ashes of a monk who fasted for years beneath a tree, subsisting on herbs and mountain spring water, eventually entering a final meditative state from which he never emerged. The tree still stands, twisted, ancient, and covered in red prayer ribbons. Unlike the front-facing parts of Mount Johor that revolve around the cult of Kitagaba and themes of salvation, the back ridge engages with the subtler aspects of Buddhist practice: impermanence, solitude, mindfulness, and the slow evaporation of ego. Every root that trips you, every mist-veiled drop of rain on a stone step, becomes part of that teaching. Here, you do not recite sutras to gain merit. You simply walk, breathe, observe. That is the practice. That is the prayer. In modern times, few people venture into the back ridge. Even some lifelong residents of Johor's main villages have never gone beyond the familiar front temples. Yet for those who do, hikers, spiritual seekers, artists, monks, the experience is transformative. It is said that time behaves differently in the back ridge, stretching and contracting like breath. You might walk for hours and feel as though only moments have passed. Or you may rest under a tree and feel that you've been there for years. The mountain does not mark time, it opens it. The back ridge of Mount Johor is one of those unreal places that defy summary. It exists between visibility and disappearance, between presence and absence, between the outer landscape and the mind's inner terrain. It does not offer clear answers, but instead holds space for the questions we are too hurried to ask elsewhere. In a world obsessed with spectacle and speed, it remains quiet, unbranded, unclaimed, a retreat not just from the world, but into a deeper part of the self. You do not conquer the back ridge. You do not capture it in photos. You simply go, and if you're patient, it allows you to stay. For an hour. For a lifetime. For as long as it takes to remember that stillness is not the absence of movement, but the presence of everything. Mount Leigong, or Leigongshan, meaning Thunder God Mountain, rises like a sleeping deity in the southeast of Guizhou province, shrouded in layers of cloud, mystery, and ancestral memory. It is not merely a geographic formation but a sacred presence in the cultural heartland of China's Miao and Dong minority peoples. Towering to 2,178 meters at its summit, Leigongshan is one of the highest peaks in this corner of the country. But what makes it truly unreal is not its height. It's the fusion of primeval nature, deep animistic tradition, and the lingering sensation that the mountain is quietly alive, watching, breathing, and remembering. Unlike the exposed, sun-drenched peaks of China's northern ranges, Mount Leigong exists in a world of constant mist and rain. Its slopes are wrapped in dense montane forest, its air heavy with moisture, its cliffs trailing veils of moss and lichen. It is not a mountain of clear vistas, but one of sudden revelations, where sunlight pierces fog in golden shafts, and emerald valleys appear for a moment before vanishing into white oblivion. Here, clouds do not simply float overhead, they descend and coil around the trees, slipping between branches and filling every hollow with their ghostly touch. This continual interplay of light and vapor lends Leigongshan a dreamlike texture, as though it lives on the threshold between earth and spirit. Leigongshan's ecological richness is staggering. Because of its varied altitude and isolation, the mountain hosts a uniquely preserved microcosm of subtropical biodiversity. Towering firs and ancient oaks dominate the higher slopes, their bark softened with moss and draped in vines. At lower elevations, dense thickets of bamboo rattle in the wind while carpets of wildflowers burst into color during spring and summer. Rhododendrons bloom in blazing clusters beside quiet footpaths, and ferns unfurl in the soft, shaded understory. The air is thick with the calls of birds, silver pheasants, golden-fronted fulvetas, and elusive cuckoos, and at night, the mountain hums with the sounds of frogs, insects, and distant water tumbling down hidden gullies. Yet Leigongshan is not merely a botanical refuge. It is a sanctuary for stories. In the animistic cosmology of the Miao and Dong peoples, Leigongshan is the sacred seat of the thunder god, Lei Gong, the divine enforcer of heavenly justice. He is depicted with wings, claws, and a fearsome face, wielding thunderbolts against wrongdoers and evil spirits. According to ancient belief, when thunder cracks across the sky, it is Lei Gong striking down deceit and impurity. The mountain that bears his name is revered not as a metaphor but as his very home, a living being infused with divine power. It is said that during storms, the mountain's rocks vibrate with his presence, and that certain caves echo with voices when no one is near. This belief is not abstract, it is active, woven into daily life and ceremonial practice. Villages in the shadow of Leigongshan often perform rituals to honor and appease the thunder god, particularly before planting or during funerals, when his judgment is said to be especially potent. Shamans, known as babu in local dialect, conduct chants beside sacred stones, burning juniper branches and offering rice wine and chickens. These ceremonies are not quaint folklore, they are serious spiritual engagements with a mountain that the people consider alive and responsive. To disrespect Leigongshan, whether by cutting sacred trees or speaking arrogantly on its trails, is considered dangerous. Stories circulate of those who mocked the mountain and were struck ill, lost their way in the fog, or suffered misfortune soon after. Cultural preservation is tangible here. The villages scattered along the lower reaches of Leigongshan, places like Gaoyao, Shidong, and Shijiang, are living repositories of traditional Miao and Dong life. Wooden stilt houses with carved balconies perch over cascading streams. Weaving looms clack in quiet corners, producing rich brocades dyed in indigo and embroidered with silver thread. The Dong people are famed for their intricate drum towers and covered wind and rain bridges, architectural wonders that blend functionality with symbolic protection. In festival season, these villages come alive with drum dances, reed pipe music, and storytelling marathons that last until dawn. These aren't just celebrations, they are acts of cultural survival, expressions of continuity beneath the mountain's eternal watch. As you ascend Leigongshan itself, the human world begins to fall away. The trails become narrower, more weathered, threading through dense growth and steep escarpments. Occasional wooden wayposts, inscribed in both Chinese and minority languages, guide the way, but they often dissolve into the undergrowth or become obscured by fog. The climb is not technically demanding, but it is spiritually intense. The higher you go, the more the mountain presses into your senses. The air becomes cooler, tinged with the scent of wet leaves and tree resin. Water trickles constantly, down roots, over rocks, sometimes across the trail itself. You pass gnarled trees shaped by wind and time. Some so old they are believed to be the embodiment of ancestral spirits. Then, somewhere above the tree line, you reach the stone drum platform, a large, flat rock where, according to legend, Lei Gong himself once struck his thunder drum to awaken the sky. Local guides say that if you sit silently here, especially during a passing storm, you can feel the vibrations of the mountain resonate through the stone. Some travelers report strange dreams after sitting there, visions of thunder, celestial stairways, or great birds circling overhead. Skeptics call it coincidence, but those who felt it know otherwise. One of the most beautiful and unreal experiences comes near the summit, where an alpine meadow unexpectedly opens amid the cloud forest. This high-altitude glade, known locally as the Heavens Table, is ringed by ancient conifers and filled with wildflowers in late spring. On clear days, the entire valley below spreads like a tapestry of green and gold, while in mist, the field becomes an island afloat in a sea of white. It is here that local poets and monks have long come to meditate and write. It is said that a single breath taken here cleanses 3 lifetimes of sorrow. At the mountain's peak, there is no grand temple, only a stone altar, cracked and mossy, facing east. Offerings are still placed here, silver coins, bundles of herbs, carved wooden thunderbirds. There is no guide to explain its meaning. You must feel it yourself. The wind whistles like a song, and the fog presses close, carrying with it the memory of countless prayers. If you stay long enough, you may hear a deep rumble, not from the earth, but from the clouded sky above, as if Lei Gong has stirred to acknowledge your presence. Descending the mountain is like waking from a dream. The fog thins, the birds reappear, and the path grows wide again. You return not just to lower elevation, but to a different state of being. The climb, the mist, the legends, they settle in the chest, forming something between memory and myth. You begin to notice how your thoughts have quieted, how your senses have sharpened. You listen differently. You walk more slowly. The mountain has done its work. Mount Lei Gong is not just one of the most unreal places in China, it is one of the most spiritually alive. It exists at the intersection of nature's wild perfection and culture's deepest roots, where gods are thunder and trees are teachers. It is a place where you are reminded that the world is not entirely mapped, not entirely known, that mystery still lives, breathing, cloaked in fog, waiting to be honored. Mount Dayao, or Dayaoshan, lies cradled in the eastern reaches of Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region, a place so quietly magnificent that it almost seems to will itself into obscurity. Unlike many of China's more renowned peaks with centuries of temples, imperial visits, or tourism campaigns attached to them, Dayaoshan remains virtually untouched by time, development, or modernity. It is an ancient wilderness, raw, mysterious, and unruly, where jagged karst mountains rise from the forest like fossilized waves frozen mid-motion, where the canopy is so thick that sunlight rarely touches the forest floor, and where silence is a language spoken by wind, stone, and leaf. The Dayaoshan Range sprawls across the borderlands between Guangxi and Hunan, forming a vast, rugged landscape that is as ecologically vital as it is culturally isolated. Unlike the limestone karsts of Guilin and Yangshior, polished and paraded before cameras, Dayaoshan's karsts are wild, densely forested, and cloaked in a permanent hush. Their silhouettes are less about delicate spires and more about sheer, brooding walls, rising in shadowed folds and steep ravines that cradle waterfalls and gorges. These are not mountains designed for postcard beauty, they are mountains made for those who seek to disappear into the Prime Val. Here, nature reigns completely. Human settlements are scarce and mostly exist on the periphery. Small hamlets of Yao, Zhuang, and Miao minorities, whose ancestors have lived in the valleys for generations, carving out a respectful coexistence with the forest without disturbing its deeper spirit. In fact, the name Dayao itself refers not only to the mountain range but also to the Yao people who have historically lived here, a minority group known for their animistic traditions, shamanic practices, and deep reverence for the natural world. In Dayaoshan, the land is not property. It is ancestry. It is spirit. It is law. As one steps into Dayaoshan's interior, the modern world evaporates. There are no cable cars, no ticket booths, no concrete paths with handrails. Instead, footpaths worn by centuries of passing hooves and feet wind through the forest, sometimes vanishing into undergrowth or descending into riverbeds. The terrain is rugged, with limestone outcrops, slippery rock slabs, and sudden vertical drops. Hikers and researchers who attempt to penetrate the deeper interior often describe a near-vertical labyrinth of cliffs and canyons, a place where GPS fails, where compasses spin, and where time behaves strangely. The forest canopy here is among the oldest and most biologically rich in southern China. Towering hardwoods, some hundreds of years old, rise above a tangled understory of bamboo, vines, and ferns. These are climax forests, ecosystems that have reached an equilibrium so rarely seen elsewhere. Ancient camphor and fig trees dominate the higher elevations, while dense swathes of rhododendron and magnolia blanket the slopes below. Orchids grow wild, clinging to bark and stone. The soil is dark, wet, and alive with insects and fungus. You feel it the moment you step in. The forest isn't a setting, it's a presence. It watches. It listens. Wildlife here is elusive, but abundant. Clouded leopards have been sighted, ghostly, solitary hunters that melt into the trees at the first whiff of humanity. Black bears roam the higher slopes, and golden cats are rumored to slink through the lower forests. Birdsong fills the canopy, and at dusk, the entire forest seems to hum with life. Frogs calling from hidden pools, cicadas pulsating with rhythm, owls casting echoes into the void. Certain rare species, like the white-headed langur or the black-crested gibbon, are protected within Dayaoshan's sanctuary-like isolation, their survival owed to the inaccessibility that frustrates developers but preserves life. Water is a constant element here, emerging from the stone in sudden torrents, bubbling brooks, or subterranean springs. Karst topography is porous, and beneath the forest lies an entire world of underground rivers, sinkholes, and cave systems that stretch for miles. Some caves are so vast that they contain their own microclimates, fog swirling above crystal-clear lakes, blind fish swimming in dark streams. Stalactites hang like frozen lightning bolts. Inside, the temperature drops abruptly, and footsteps echo for what seems like eternity. Many caves remain unexplored. Local legend says that some of them are connected by tunnels to other sacred mountains, forming an underground map of the spiritual heart of southern China. But beyond ecology and geology, Dayaoshan is saturated with myth. The Yarrow people believe the mountains are inhabited by spirits called Mai, protective entities that dwell in rocks, trees, and water. Before venturing into the forest, elders burn incense and murmur chants, asking for safe passage and guidance. Sacred groves, hidden waterfalls, and unusual rock formations are all seen as potential dwelling places for these spirits. Some areas are considered so charged with energy that they are forbidden to enter. Even today, travelers report strange sensations, unexpected chills, dreams of ancestors, a persistent feeling of being watched. Dayaoshan does not hide its power, it simply asks you to acknowledge it. In the rainy season, the mountains transform entirely. Thick fog rolls in from the valleys, wrapping every tree, cliff, and trail in a dense white veil. Paths become invisible. Sounds become distorted. Streams flood their banks and roar through the forest like silver dragons. It's in these moments that Dayaoshan reveals its true nature, not a scenic retreat, but a place of trial, of transformation. To spend a night on the mountain during the rains is to come face to face with yourself. The isolation presses against your thoughts. The silence becomes a mirror. Many who've come to hike or study here have emerged with stories they hesitate to repeat. Encounters with animals they couldn't name, caves that moved when entered, dreams that lingered for months. There is little infrastructure in or around Dayaoshan, and that is precisely why it remains so powerful. The absence of temples, roads, and observation decks has allowed the mountain to remain a sanctuary not only for biodiversity but for ancient ways of knowing the world. When you walk here, you walk in the footsteps of herbalists, shamans, outcasts, and visionaries. You walk into a world before boundaries. And unlike national parks or famous sacred mountains, there is no clear boundary that marks the transition into Dayaoshan's domain. It simply begins, subtly, with a shift in the air, a deepening of the forest, a quieting of the outside world. In some remote areas, the only signs of human passage are stone cairns, small, simple stacks of rocks that mark old migration routes or sacred spaces. These cairns are not trail markers in the Western sense. They are offerings, prayers in stone, placed one atop another in wordless testimony. To find one is to be reminded that others have come before you, and that every step in Dayaoshan is also a step into something older, deeper, unseen. If Mount Lei Gong is the spiritual thunder that guards culture, Mount Dayao is the quiet breath of the earth itself, a place that neither asks for nor allows control. It is not a backdrop for enlightenment. It is the teacher. And it teaches not with words, but with damp roots, with sudden silence, with the feeling of being alone and not alone at once. To visit Dayaoshan is to leave behind not only roads and maps, but also the illusion that the world has been fully explored. It reminds you that there are still places on Earth where human presence is a guest, not a master. Where myths are not decorations but inherited truths. Where a forest can be as sacred as a temple, and a mountain range can be a soul. Mount Chizi, often referred to as Chessboard Mountain, is one of Yunnan's lesser-known geological gems, cloaked in both mystique and mathematical symmetry. Its name, Chizi Shan, directly translates to Chess Piece Mountain or Chessboard Mountain, a title that at first glance might seem whimsical or poetic. But one only needs to stand atop its summit, gaze across its plateaued crown, and witness the strange, surreal grid of stone formations arrayed beneath the open sky to understand how precisely, and uncannily, the name fits. Located in the remote highlands of central Yunnan, far from the tourist-thronged hubs of Lijiang or Dali, Mount Chizhi is a place that reveals itself only to those willing to seek it. The ascent is not overly treacherous, but it is long, winding through pine-scented ridges, narrow gorges, and past the occasional yak-grazing meadow. Villages at its base, sparsely populated and ethnically mixed, including Yi and Bai communities, offer few signs of modern life. There are no paved roads leading to the summit, and most of the locals speak not of Mount Chizhi in terms of tourism, but as a place with spiritual rules and geological secrets. What makes Mount Chizhi so unreal, so utterly unlike anything else in Yunnan, or perhaps the world, is its crowning feature, a massive expanse of dark grey, square-cut basalt blocks that resemble a perfectly laid, oversized chessboard. These stone formations stretch across the mountaintop like an ancient game paused mid-play by the gods themselves. Each stone block is approximately 1 to 2 meters across, slightly raised, and separated by narrow cracks that run at right angles. From above, especially when viewed at sunrise or in mist, it looks like an enormous grid etched into the mountain's crown, disciplined, deliberate, yet hauntingly natural. The geological phenomenon behind this is likely the result of ancient volcanic activity, where cooling lava fractured over time into rectangular columns and slabs due to thermal contraction, a process somewhat akin to the famous Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, though Chizhi's pattern is square rather than hexagonal. But despite scientific theories, there remains something unsettlingly precise about the formations. Even researchers have been baffled by how neatly and uniformly the blocks are arranged, how even their heights seem uncannily consistent, as though following a forgotten code. Locals believe these stones are not merely geological formations, but spiritual instruments, tools once used by immortals to play games of strategy and fate. In Yi mythology, the mountaintop was a heavenly arena where gods would gather to play xiangqi, Chinese chess, using stones as pieces and the land as their board. According to legend, when the gods grew bored of the world or needed to decide the fate of nations, they would meet atop Chizhi to play, and each piece they moved had consequences below. A single misstep could cause drought, war, or rebirth. These weren't just games, they were acts of cosmic intervention. Even now, villagers occasionally leave small offerings between the stones: pine cones, coins, red threads, or pieces of dried fruit. During the annual Qixi festival, China's traditional Valentine's Day, young couples sometimes make pilgrimages here, believing that walking hand in hand across the chessboard brings harmony to their union, aligning their hearts like matched pieces on a divine board. But Mount Chizhi is more than its summit. Its slopes are steeped in biodiversity and natural beauty that shifts dramatically with elevation. At lower altitudes, subtropical forests rich with wild banana trees, rhododendron, and fig vines dominate the terrain. Mists from nearby rivers rise in the early morning, curling through the undergrowth like wandering spirits. As one climbs higher, the forest becomes sparser, giving way to pine, cypress, and alpine meadows where wildflowers bloom in sudden, dazzling abundance each spring. Blues, yellows, purples, all shining against the darker soil. Birds are ever present, especially thrushes, cuckoos, and warblers, their calls echoing between the cliffs. Hidden within the folds of the mountain are natural springs so cold and clear they seem unreal, reflecting the sky with crystalline clarity. One such spring, called the Mirror of the Mind, lies halfway up the southern slope, sheltered by a ring of jagged rocks. According to local oral tradition, drinking from the mirror on the night of the new moon grants clarity of thought and the ability to predict someone's next move, an echo, perhaps, of the mountain's association with strategy and forethought. Some monks and travelers, especially from nearby monasteries in Dali and Kunming, have been known to make annual pilgrimages here for meditation retreats, considering Mount Chizhi a perfect place to train the mind in awareness and decision-making. The very layout of the mountain seems to reflect this cerebral quality. From the base to the summit, the trails pass through oddly structured terrain, ridges aligned like rows of pawns, outcrops resembling bishops or rooks, and stone slabs shaped almost uncannily like dropped chess pieces. Skeptics call it pareidolia, the mind's habit of finding patterns where none were intended, but others insist the mountain is alive with intention, revealing symbols to those willing to look closely. One of the mountain's more obscure features is the so-called Strategy Cave, a narrow fissure at the edge of the chessboard summit, which descends into darkness like a lost thought. The cave is difficult to find, often concealed by fog or overgrown brush, and even more difficult to enter. Those who have made it down the slick, twisting descent report that the walls are etched with strange carvings, geometric patterns, ancient characters, and in one instance, what appears to be a perfect game board marked on the stone floor, surrounded by circular depressions that may once have held game pieces. Whether this is a natural formation, a forgotten shrine, or simply coincidence, no one knows. But the cave has become an object of fascination among esoteric scholars and folklorists alike. Unlike many of China's sacred peaks, Mount Chizhi has no large temples or institutional religious presence. Its power is older, quieter, and more elemental. It does not demand devotion through ceremony, but contemplation. It is not a mountain of pilgrimage, but of puzzles, a place where you come not to pray, but to reflect, to unravel the game of your own life across the chessboard of time and memory. In recent years, whispers of developing the area into a scenic site have circulated, but so far the terrain's remoteness and resistance to commercialization have held the forces of tourism at bay. For now, Mount Chizhi remains a sanctuary for those who seek the strange and cerebral beauty of nature. Its hidden geometries, its metaphoric terrain, its silent logic that precedes language. It is a place that rewards stillness, strategy, and silence. To stand on the summit at dusk, as the last amber light filters through the mist and the squares of stone seem to glow faintly beneath your feet, is to feel as though you are part of a game too vast to see, too ancient to name. Each step across the mountain becomes a move. Each breath, a choice. The board is laid, the pieces in place, but the outcome remains unknown. Mount Daming Shan, is one of Guangxi's most spectacular and biologically rich mountains, a place where dense rainforest, mist-veiled cliffs, and plunging waterfalls converge in an orchestra of life and elemental beauty. Rising in the northwest part of Guangxi Zhuang Autonomous Region, near Nanning, Mount Daming is a towering monument of ecological wonder. Though not as widely known as China's more storied sacred mountains, Daming Shan is a place that exudes sacredness without the need for temples or legends. It is sanctified by its sheer vitality, by its uninterrupted cycles of mist and rain, and by the untamed spirit that pulses through every fern-fringed path and cloud-shrouded ridge. The name Daming translates to great brightness, a title that might strike one as ironic given that the mountain is often wrapped in fog and clouds for much of the year. But there's truth in the name, because when the sunlight does break through the cloud cover, the effect is blindingly beautiful. Rays pour through the canopy in golden shafts, illuminate waterfalls in prisms of color, and flash off dewdrops that cling to the tips of leaves like miniature lanterns. It is not a brightness of constant clarity, but one that emerges through contrast, a metaphorical brightness, earned after the long hush of mist and shadow. From base to summit, Daming Shan is a vertical vault of biodiversity. It is one of the last remaining strongholds of primary subtropical rainforest in Guangxi, and within its folds live thousands of species of flora and fauna, many of them endemic and endangered. The forest begins at lower elevations with dense groves of bamboo, broadleaf evergreens, and tangled underbrush where snakes, civets, and rare pheasants lurk unseen. As you climb, the vegetation shifts to include massive camphor trees, ancient firs, and rare species of rhododendrons, orchids, and tree ferns. In spring, the forest bursts into bloom, with violet and crimson blossoms catching the mist and glowing as if lit from within. Walking through these forests feels like entering a living cathedral. The silence is never truly silent, broken constantly by the warble of birds, the sudden crash of a macaque in the canopy, or the distant murmur of a stream. The air is thick and wet, rich with the scent of moss, loam, and damp stone. Insects flit between shafts of light, and frogs chirp in hidden pools nestled in rock clefts. The rainforest is not just seen but heard, smelled, tasted. It overwhelms the senses in the gentlest, most enveloping way. Mount Daming is also famed for its cloud seas, which form regularly around the mid and upper slopes. At dawn, these clouds pool in the valleys and swirl between the peaks like living silk, a slow-motion dance of vapor and gravity. For hikers and photographers lucky enough to ascend in the early morning, the experience is surreal. Jagged summits poke through a white blanket that stretches to the horizon. Pine trees, silhouetted against the clouds, resemble inkbrush paintings come to life. It's a scene both ancient and ephemeral, one that has inspired generations of poets, artists, and monks, even though few have ever set foot here compared to China's more popular ranges. And yet, for all its visual majesty, Mount Daming remains an ecological treasure of staggering importance. The mountain lies within the Daming Mountain Nature Reserve, a protected area established to conserve its extraordinary biodiversity. Over 2,000 species of plants have been catalogued here, including many medicinal herbs used in traditional Chinese medicine. Among the trees are rare and endangered species like the Chinese yew and kotsura tree, while in the undergrowth grow strange and delicate flowers whose scientific names are known only to a handful of botanists. The fauna of Daming Shan is no less impressive. It is one of the few remaining habitats for the elusive clouded leopard, a solitary predator whose ghost-like presence gives the mountain an added sense of mystery. Lesser creatures, flying squirrels, pangolins, wild boars, and masked palm civets, inhabit the nightscape, while diurnal species like barking deer, langurs, and Chinese serows make their way through the forest by day. Bird life is abundant, with crested kingfishers, partridges, eagles, and iridescent sunbirds among the many species that animate the trees. The biodiversity is so rich and relatively undisturbed that scientists regularly discover new insects, fungi, and microflora each year. The mountain's waterfalls are another of its defining features. With a rainy season that soaks the slopes for months at a time, Daming Shan becomes a vertical garden of cascading water. Some of these waterfalls descend in long, white veils that seem to vanish into mist mid-drop. Others thunder down narrow gorges in a deafening roar. One of the most famous, called the Longlin Waterfall, spills from a cliffside over 100 meters high, plunging into a turquoise basin that reflects the clouds above. The water here is crystal clear, cold, and thought by locals to have healing properties. Many visitors, especially those from nearby Zhuang villages, still come to bathe and pray in the pools, even if formal shrines are few and far between. Though Daming Shan is not traditionally a Buddhist or Daoist mountain like Amei or Wudang, there is still a deep spiritual energy here, one rooted not in religion, but in reverence for the land. The local Zhuang and Yao minority communities, who have lived around the base of the mountain for centuries, hold animistic beliefs tied to nature spirits. Certain trees are considered sacred, especially those that grow in unusual shapes or on isolated crags. There are areas of the mountain that villagers avoid, not out of fear, but out of respect, caves where spirit guardians are said to reside, or cliffs believed to house ancestral souls. Oral histories speak of sages and hermits who once lived on the mountain, drawn by its quietude and its power to dissolve worldly attachment. Traces of these figures can still be found in hidden meditation shelters, now overgrown, or in smooth stone altars marked with strange, weather-worn inscriptions. Unlike the grand monasteries elsewhere in China, these sites were not meant to attract pilgrims. They were built to vanish, to harmonize with the forest and sky. This disappearing quality is perhaps the most unreal aspect of Daming Shan. It asks nothing of you but presence, and in return, it offers the sublime. Accessing Daming Shan is still an adventure. Though there is now a modest visitor infrastructure on one side of the reserve, wooden walkways, ranger stations, and a few basic cabins, much of the mountain remains wild and inaccessible. Many trails are unmarked, weaving through dense jungle, across rope bridges, and along narrow ridgelines with sheer drops on either side. Hikers need to be prepared for sudden weather changes, thick fog, and the occasional leech or forest snake. But those who persevere are rewarded not just with beauty, but with transformation. Perhaps that's why Daming Shan feels so unreal, not because it dazzles the eye with rare views, but because it invites you to become part of something older and more profound than yourself. In a world driven by acceleration, extraction, and spectacle, here is a place that thrives on slowness, humility, and interconnection. A place where every leaf is a miracle, every stream a teacher, and every shift in fog a message that the world still holds secrets. To stand beneath its canopy, to breathe in its moss-scented air, to listen as a waterfall thunders somewhere beyond sight while clouds slip silently around your shoulders, that is to remember what it feels like to belong not to a society, but to an ecosystem. Not to a religion, but to a rhythm. Mount Daming is not a destination. It is a communion. And once you've walked its misty trails and heard its rain-fed symphonies, it never really leaves you. Mount Daqin, or Daqinshan, rises like a windswept sentinel across the northern frontier of China, where the great grasslands of Inner Mongolia begin to ripple outward toward the Gobi Desert. Unlike the lush, mist-veiled ranges of southern China, Daqinshan is a land of stark beauty, raw elements, and vast, open silence. Here, the earth is laid bare, ridges stripped of trees, valleys painted in ochre and gold, and skies so wide they seem to bend with the weight of their own emptiness. This is a mountain range not of softness and fertility, but of endurance, clarity, and wind-carved truth. Stretching over 200 kilometers along the southern edge of the Inner Mongolian Plateau near the city of Hohhot, Dakinshan forms part of the natural boundary between the Mongolian steppe and the more arid regions to the south. The name Darchin literally translates to Great Azure or Great Blue, a reference not to the mountains themselves, but to the expansive skies above them, which on clear days can become a dome of such perfect blue it almost feels artificial. This blue, this light, this exposure to the elements, it defines every moment on Dakinshan's ridges. The terrain is wild, rugged, and dramatic. Sharp ridgelines twist across the landscape like the spines of giant sleeping dragons, interrupted occasionally by jagged rock outcrops or highland plateaus where wild grasses ripple in the wind. Unlike China's forested peaks or tropical ranges, Dakinshan is a place of minimalism. Trees are few, clustered only in isolated valleys or sheltered north-facing slopes, where small stands of pine or poplar cling stubbornly to life. The dominant ecosystem here is alpine steppe, wind-bent grasses, hardy shrubs, and low-slung flora that have adapted to bitter winters, dry summers, and powerful gusts that can roar across the ridgelines with a sound like distant drums. And it is the wind that defines Dakinshan more than anything else. It never stops. Even on calm days, a steady breeze moves across the range like an invisible tide, reshaping the clouds, combing the grass, and carrying with it the smell of dry earth, sun-bleached stone, and sometimes, if you're lucky, the sweet aroma of sage or wild herbs blooming in the cracks between rocks. This ever-present wind is both a sculptor and a storyteller, eroding cliffs into strange shapes and echoing through valleys like the voices of forgotten nomads. Dakinshan has never been a heavily populated or domesticated range, and that's part of its magic. For millennia, it has stood as a kind of buffer between civilizations, between the agrarian empires to the south and the horse-riding cultures of the Mongolian steppe. During the Han Dynasty, the range marked a natural borderland where outposts were established to defend against Xiongnu incursions. Later dynasties fortified this region with segments of the Great Wall, some of which still exist in ruined form along the mountain's southern edge. Stone ridges half swallowed by the earth, stretching across the land like the scars of ancient conflict. But long before any wall or war, Dakinshan was a place of spiritual power. The nomadic peoples who roamed these highlands, the Xiongnu, the Khitan, the Mongols, regarded the mountains as sacred. In Mongolian, mountains are often considered the bones of the earth, and Dakinshan, with its long, visible spine and high-altitude isolation, fits that description perfectly. Even today, herders still perform simple ceremonies on the slopes, burning juniper branches, tying blue kadag, prayer scarves, to trees or rocks, and offering fermented mare's milk to the spirits of the land. The mountain is not just scenery. It is a being, a guardian, a whispering god. While most of Dakinshan remains undeveloped and relatively untouched, some areas, especially around Hohhot, have become accessible to hikers, geologists, and solitude seekers who come not for luxury or entertainment, but for the raw experience of the land. Trails here are often little more than footpaths carved by goats or shepherds, winding past rocky bluffs, sunken valleys, and sudden vistas that open up like curtains being drawn. To walk here is to move through silence, real silence, not the absence of noise, but the presence of space. Climbing the higher peaks, which reach up to 2,300 meters in elevation, brings you into a landscape that feels alien in its simplicity. The air is thin and crisp, the grass brittle beneath your feet, and the world below seems impossibly far away. There are no trees to hide the horizon, no cities in sight, only the rolling sea of the steppe stretching out in all directions, undulating hills of gold and brown, broken only by the occasional yurt, a distant rider on horseback, or a cluster of grazing sheep. You begin to feel what the old steppe warriors must have felt, not isolation, but vastness, not desolation, but freedom. One of the most hauntingly beautiful places on Dakinshan is the Shemen Gorge, or Stone Gate, a natural passageway where two cliffs rise like twin sentinels on either side of a narrow valley. Wind funnels through this cleft with great force, and legend holds that it was once a secret path used by steppe raiders to descend undetected into the valleys below. Carvings on nearby rock walls, some ancient, some modern, depict horses, weapons, and mysterious geometric patterns that some scholars believe are remnants of a shamanic tradition lost to time. Another point of fascination is the Dakinshan meteor crater, located in the northeastern section of the range. This relatively little-known geological site features a massive, bowl-shaped depression believed to have been formed by an ancient meteorite impact. Over time, it has become overgrown with grass and brush, but the depression remains visible, especially from the air. Some local herders say the crater is a sky door, a place where the heavens once touched the earth with fire and power. Though wildlife here is sparser than in southern ranges, Dakinshan still harbors resilient species adapted to its harsh climate. Steppe eagles soaring on thermal drafts, marmots that whistle from burrows, and the occasional snow leopard sighting in the higher, more remote ridges. Herds of wild horses, descendants of ancient steppe stock, still roam freely in some areas, their silhouettes etched against the golden grasslands at dusk. Dakinshan's unrealness does not lie in tropical excess or sacred architecture, but in its raw minimalism. It is a mountain of subtraction, not addition. There are no grand temples atop its peaks, no cascades of cherry blossoms or snow-draped pagodas. There is only stone, sky, wind, and space. And in this reduction, there is profound revelation. The world here is elemental: water and rock, grass and hoof, light and shadow. To walk in Dakinshan is to learn patience. The mountain does not immediately reveal itself, nor does it cater to spectacle. It rewards those who stay long enough to feel its rhythms, to notice the shifting of wind across a field, the way shadows lengthen on a ridge, the subtle change in the color of grass as the sun begins to set. In these quiet observations, one finds clarity, focus, perhaps even peace. In the end, Dakinshan is a place that challenges the definition of beauty. It asks you to abandon your expectations, to meet the land on its own terms, and to embrace not what it gives you, but what it allows you to discover in yourself. It is a place where the earth speaks in wind and stone, and where those who listen leave changed. Mount Zhaoguang, or Jiaoguangshan, sits quietly among the lush hills of Guangdong province, its silhouette modest compared to the towering peaks of western China, but no less striking in its own right. Located near the town of Lianzhou in northern Guangdong, this relatively low elevation mountain, rising to just under 1,200 meters, has long stood as a hidden sanctuary of cliffs, karst caverns, emerald rivers, and weathered stone that whispers of ancient time. Jiaoguangshan is not a mountain that dominates the skyline. Rather, it weaves itself into the land like a thread through silk, subtle but radiant, and layered with the quiet drama of contrast and surprise. From afar, the mountain's outline seems gentle, rounded hilltops and gently sloping flanks cloaked in green, but as one draws closer, the terrain shifts suddenly and dramatically. Towering cliffs emerge from the forest in vertical walls of grey and ochre, striated with time, carved by centuries of wind and water. These cliffs, although modest in elevation, form abrupt escarpments that seem to rise straight out of the earth, draped in vines and moss, and punctuated by deep crevices and natural overhangs. Hidden within these walls are dozens of caves, some narrow and sinuous, others vast and cathedral-like, each one a world unto itself, cut into the mountain as though the stone were a scroll waiting to be read. The name Zhaoguang means illuminating light or bright radiance, a poetic reference to the mountain's spiritual and visual power. According to local tradition, the mountain was named after a miraculous incident during the Tang dynasty when a Buddhist monk saw a column of golden light descending onto the peak during meditation. Since then, Jiaoguangshan has been considered a place of enlightenment, modest in form but potent in energy. In this sense, the mountain's beauty lies not in its sheer scale, but in its symbolic illumination, the way it captures and reflects light through its cliffs and rivers, through its caves and morning mists. One of the most renowned features of Jiaoguangshan is its intricate system of karst caves, formed over millennia by the dissolution of limestone through underground water channels. Among them, the most famous is Zhaoguang Cave itself, a labyrinthine network of chambers, passageways, and hidden hollows whose stalactites and stalagmites resemble frozen chandeliers and melting columns. Some of these formations drip slowly, continuously, as they have done for tens of thousands of years, creating a living architecture sculpted by nothing more than time and water. Inside, the air is cool and heavy with the scent of mineral and moisture. In some chambers, the walls are so smooth and resonant that a whispered voice can be heard echoing softly from dozens of meters away. The cave systems have long inspired wonder and reverence. During the Song and Ming dynasties, local scholars and monks would inscribe poetry on the walls, carving elegant verses directly into the stone or painting them with mineral pigments. Some of these inscriptions remain intact today, preserved in the dry interiors, faded but legible, providing a direct connection to centuries past. Themes of solitude, eternity, and the impermanence of all things are common, evidence of the deep philosophical resonance these hidden spaces once held. Outside the caves, the mountain is veined with streams and rivers. Clear, cold water that descends in a series of gentle falls and rocky cascades, eventually feeding into the nearby Lian River. These streams are shaded by forests of broadleaf trees, bamboo groves, and occasional old-growth camphor trees with roots like twisted rope. During the warmer months, butterflies swarm the riverbanks, and dragonflies skim across the surface, their wings flashing in the sunlight. In the quieter pools, one might glimpse fish darting through the shadows, or even a water snake sliding silently beneath a veil of algae. These rivers are not just lifelines for the ecosystem, they are also deeply embedded in local folklore. One tale tells of a celestial maiden who descended from the heavens to bathe in the mountain's waters. Enchanted by the serenity and beauty of the land, she remained behind, transforming into the mountain spirit who still watches over travelers and protects the local forests. Offerings of rice wine and incense are sometimes left at secluded stone altars near the springs, a quiet gesture of gratitude or request for safe passage. These traditions, passed down through generations of villagers, reflect the deeply animistic roots that still shape rural southern China, even in the shadow of rapid modernization. There is a special time each year when Mount Xiaoguang takes on an almost otherworldly appearance, late spring, just after the first heavy rains. During this season, the mountain becomes enshrouded in thick morning fog that clings to the cliffs and pools in the river valleys. The sunlight, when it finally breaks through, filters in as slanted beams that catch the mist and scatter light in ethereal patterns. Everything glistens, the leaves, the stone, the water, as though the entire mountain has been dipped in dew and silence. Hikers who make their way up in the early hours are often rewarded with surreal views. A lone pagoda rising above the cloud sea, the spire of a distant peak poking through the mist like a sentinel from another age, and the gentle sound of water threading through the forest below. Though not especially high, Jiaoguangshan is surprisingly rich in biodiversity. Its elevation and subtropical location create a microclimate that supports a wide range of flora and fauna. Wild orchids bloom on shaded ledges, ferns grow in thick carpets along the forest floor, and medicinal herbs, many of which have been used in traditional Chinese medicine for centuries, can be found by those who know where to look. Birds are especially abundant here. Laughing thrushes, cuckoos, and flycatchers fill the air with song, while hawks soar along the cliffs. On rare occasions, hikers have spotted pangolins or even masked civets moving through the undergrowth, quiet, elusive symbols of a still thriving wilderness. Culturally, Mount Xiaoguang has long served as a quiet retreat for poets, painters, and monks. Though it lacks the monumental temples of Mount Amei or Mount Wudang, it hosts a number of small, weathered hermitages and meditation pavilions tucked into the cliffs or nestled by springs. One such site, the Hall of Radiant Wisdom, is no more than a simple stone structure with a tiled roof and a weathered incense stand. Yet its location, perched above a cascading river, surrounded by wind-chiming bamboo, is so serene that many visitors claim to experience a profound sense of peace just sitting in its shadow. Modern development has only lightly touched Jiaoguangshan. A few hiking trails have been added in recent years, along with signs and rest areas for visitors. But much of the mountain remains in a natural state, quiet, unscripted, and wild at the edges. Local guides still lead hikes to lesser-known caves or waterfalls not marked on any map, and it's not uncommon for travelers to spend hours without seeing another soul. That solitude, that sense of stepping outside time, is what makes Jiaoguangshan so powerful. This mountain does not proclaim itself with grandeur. It reveals itself slowly, in shadows and reflections, in trickles of light across cave walls and the hush of wind through trees. It is a place where contrast, light and dark, stone and water, sky and earth, is the very fabric of beauty. It asks you not to conquer it, but to listen, to linger, to be still. To visit Mount Xiaoguang is to be reminded that wonder doesn't require height or fame. It requires intimacy with the land, a willingness to notice the delicate choreography of geology and ecology, and an openness to the stories that still ripple through rivers and echo in caves. It is a place where the earth speaks softly, but with a voice that stays in you long after the trail disappears behind you. Mount Luofushan, nestled in the heart of Guangdong province near the city of Huizhou, is a place where natural elegance, spiritual resonance, and deep historical memory intertwine into a subtropical masterpiece. Known simply as Luofu Mountain, its scenic ridge is not just one of the most picturesque parts of this revered massif, it's a profound corridor of cultural and ecological harmony. In contrast to the raw cliffs of northern Guangdong's wilder ranges or the austere highlands of Inner Mongolia, Luofu offers a different kind of majesty. Flowing springs beneath towering palms, moss-covered stone steps that lead through bamboo groves, and ancient temples tucked amid clouds of incense and flowering trees. Every bend of the ridge reveals another dimension of serenity, each more intricate and unreal than the last. Despite rising to a relatively modest height of just over 1,200 meters, Mount Luofu has long been regarded as one of China's 10 great spiritual mountains. Its fame began as far back as the Eastern Jin dynasty, when it became a key site of daoist cultivation. The famed daoist master Ji Hong, an alchemist, healer, philosopher, and mystic, once retreated here, believing the mountain's rich natural ingredients and remote terrain made it a perfect place to pursue immortality. Indeed, many of the caves and hidden clearings along the scenic ridge still bear traces of his legend. The Ji Xian Cave, where he is said to have meditated for days without eating. The Nine Dragon Spring, where he reportedly concocted his potions under the full moon, and the Crane Ascension Platform, where tradition claims he finally transcended mortal existence in a beam of golden light. But Mount Luofu's scenic ridge is more than myth. It is vividly real in its lush textures and living biodiversity. The landscape is sculpted by millennia of water and wind, with its slopes slashed by waterfalls, ridged with mist-veiled terraces, and dotted with wild camellias, gnarled banyans, and bamboo thickets that sway and whisper like living spirits. The entire mountain is fed by over 400 mineral-rich springs and small rivers, which pour down the slopes in glimmering sheets. These waters are not only a source of visual and auditory serenity, they're medicinal. Many locals still hike up to collect bottles of Luofu spring water, believed to be good for skin, digestion, and spiritual clarity. The scenic ridge begins near the main entrance of the mountain and extends through a winding sequence of ancient stairways, cobblestone trails, and natural stone bridges that cross gurgling brooks and flowering ravines. As you ascend, the landscape begins to change subtly but unmistakably. Palms give way to fragrant pine forests. Ferns unfurl beneath massive tree roots. Flowers bloom year-round, pink azaleas in spring, golden cassia in autumn, and orchid-like varieties that appear out of nowhere after a misty rain. This gradient of beauty is accompanied by the continuous soundtrack of mountain streams, bird calls, and the rustling of leaves in breezes that seem to carry the voices of sages. One of the most surreal features along the scenic ridge is the Baishui Immortal Spring, literally white water spring of the immortals. The water here flows over a flat rock slab that has been polished glass smooth by centuries of passage. Locals claim the spring emerges from the root of a celestial plum tree that once grew in heaven and now anchors itself invisibly beneath Luofu. Pilgrims still kneel and splash their faces here, hoping to absorb the spirit of the mountain. A short distance away, the cloud-swallowing pavilion sits on a promontory ridge, its curved eaves seeming to float above a valley perpetually filled with mist. From this viewpoint, the entire mountain range undulates like a green dragon sleeping beneath a quilt of fog. Temples are scattered all along the ridge and its surrounding slopes, many of them as old as the Tang dynasty, rebuilt, restored, and repurposed over time. Among the most revered is the Temple of Embracing Immortality, Baoxian Gong, a quiet, incense-swirled sanctuary filled with fading murals, brass censers, and calligraphy-covered beams that bear the wisdom of centuries. Here, daoist priests perform rituals that echo through time, burning talismans, chanting ancient verses, and making offerings of tea, fruit, and mountain herbs. To visit this temple is to feel suspended in a different age, a space where modernity feels like a far-off dream. Further along the ridge lies Dragon Pool Grotto, a natural cave system formed by water erosion and lined with luminescent moss. The interior is eerily beautiful. Stalactites drip from the ceiling like frozen tears, and mineral deposits have turned the walls into streaked rainbows of ochre, turquoise, and jade. According to legend, this was once the home of a guardian dragon who ensured the fertility of the land below. Today, it's a quiet place, lit only by the soft glow of lanterns left by passing pilgrims. The ridge also offers glimpses of the Seven Stars Rock, an unusual formation of 7 towering boulders that align with the Big Dipper constellation. Scholars, monks, and poets have debated their origin and meaning for centuries. Some believing the rocks are markers of ancient celestial geometry, others suggesting they were placed there by earth spirits to channel qi, the life force energy. Regardless of origin, the 7 stars remain a focal point for meditation, especially during solstices and lunar festivals. Yet for all the spiritual or that pervades Mount Luofushun, the experience along the scenic ridge is intensely personal. You do not simply walk through this place, you are drawn into dialogue with it. Every twist of the trail opens a new facet of beauty, every shift in weather changes the entire mood of the mountain. In fog, the temples seem to drift like ships in a sea of white. In sunlight, the stone paths glow with heat and life. At dusk, the sky turns violet, and bats begin to wheel above the ancient rooftops. Local villagers from the nearby hamlets of Baluo and Long Men still interact with the mountain as a living companion. Herbalists gather leaves from specific groves known to cure ailments. Tea farmers cultivate Luofu mountain tea, light, floral, and infused with the subtle essence of mountain minerals. Elders tell stories of hidden fox spirits and hermits who could summon rain with a dance. And even young people, despite the pull of modernity, return here to pray before exams or to bathe in the healing springs after illness. In recent years, Mount Luofushun has received recognition not only as a site of cultural and ecological significance but also as a model for sustainable tourism. While there are now eco-lodges, forest tea houses, and small visitor centers along the ridge, the mountain has managed to maintain its silence, its rhythm, its spell. Much of the scenic ridge is still accessible only on foot. And that is exactly how it should be. This is not a place to rush through. It is a place to ascend slowly, breath by breath, allowing the mountain to reveal its secrets in its own time. Standing atop one of the stone platforms near the ridge's end, overlooking a valley swept with clouds and birdsong, the unreality of Mount Luofushun becomes suddenly clear. This is a mountain of soft magic, not the dazzling or theatrical kind, but the deeper, quieter enchantment of balance and presence. A place where water and stone, temple and tree, memory and mist all coalesce into something timeless. Something sacred not because it was built, but because it has always been. To walk the scenic ridge is to walk the line between earth and spirit, time and stillness, nature and self. You leave the path changed, not with answers, but with the sense that the questions have shifted in a meaningful way. Mount Wanshan, or Wanshan Mountains, lies in the southeastern corner of Guizhou province, tucked within a landscape that feels like a forgotten dream. A boundless mosaic of limestone hills, misty valleys, and mushroom-shaped karst spires that rise in such profusion they seem to defy mathematics. The very name Wanshan means 10,000 mountains, and while perhaps figurative, it does little to exaggerate the effect. This is a region where the earth has buckled, folded, and risen into an ocean of stone, and where each peak and pinnacle tells its own silent story. Unreal not just in its scale but in its texture, Mount Wanshan is the grand culmination of China's karst kingdom, a surreal topography sculpted not by tectonic force alone, but by time, water, and chemical dissolution. The mountains here are not singular. They are plural in every sense, thousands of spires packed together like waves frozen in motion, each limestone column uniquely eroded, some rising like gigantic stone mushrooms, others balanced delicately like the tip of a brushstroke. Together, they form a labyrinth that stretches toward the horizon with a kind of alien elegance. Unlike the symmetrical beauty of Mount Fuji or the icy grandeur of the Alps, Wanshan is chaotic in form but harmonious in effect. Peaks soar and dip without pattern. Grottos open up where you'd least expect them. Deep clefts wind through hills covered in ferns and creeping vines. The land is unpredictable, and this makes it feel alive, not merely beautiful, but enchanted. You don't hike through Wanshan so much as explore it, like one might explore a coral reef or a forgotten temple. The formation of this spectacular karst landscape began over 300 million years ago, when the region was submerged beneath a vast tropical sea. Over countless eons, the shells and skeletons of marine organisms settled to the ocean floor, forming thick layers of calcium-rich sediment that compressed into limestone. When the sea receded, tectonic uplift pushed these layers skyward. Rain, slightly acidic from atmospheric carbon, began to eat away at the limestone. What remained after millennia of dissolution were the surreal towers, cones, and pillars that define Wanshan today. Though much of Guizhou's terrain is karstic, Mount Wanshan represents its most densely concentrated and dramatic expression. In many places, the peaks are so closely packed they resemble a forest of stone. From a high vantage point, the view is mind-bending. Thousands upon thousands of peaks like jagged dragon's teeth, shrouded in mist, their silhouettes fading into the distance. Locals say the mountains look like an army of monks bowing in prayer. Others call them stone flames, as if the earth had caught fire and turned to stone at the moment of explosion. Walking within the range, the atmosphere changes dramatically. One moment, you're gazing out at the sea of peaks from a windy cliff. The next, you're deep in a humid gorge, surrounded by dripping ferns, echoing birdsong, and towering walls that blot out the sky. Water is everywhere, flowing in thin silver threads down mossy cliffs, collecting in jade-green pools, or disappearing into limestone sinkholes. Underground rivers snake beneath the mountains, forming extensive cave systems filled with stalactites, stone curtains, and crystal chambers that sparkle when lit by lanterns. Some of these caves have been used for centuries as places of worship, others as hiding spots during periods of war. Among the most famous features of Wanshan is the mushroom stone forest, a cluster of karst spires whose tops have weathered into broad, rounded caps that make them resemble giant fungi. Some are as tall as 8-story buildings, standing precariously balanced on narrow stalks. These formations appear especially otherworldly in early morning when the mist creeps around their bases and the rising sun lights their domes in gold. The forest itself feels like a fossilized hallucination, a place that couldn't possibly exist, and yet stands solid and silent, as real as bone. There is also a deep cultural resonance embedded within the Wanshan region. This part of Guizhou is home to several ethnic minority groups, particularly the Miao, Dong, and Tujia peoples, who have lived here for centuries in relative isolation. Their villages cling to the sides of hills, tucked among terraced rice fields and interlaced by winding stone paths. Many of the wooden homes are built in traditional stilted style, their rooftops shingled with slate and decorated with geometric motifs. Within these villages, time slows. Elders still wear hand-woven clothing dyed with natural indigo, and rituals are performed to honor the mountain spirits. Offerings of rice wine, chanting prayers, and the lighting of incense near sacred caves or ancient trees. According to Miao legend, the Wanshan Mountains were once a sleeping dragon that turned to stone to protect the people. Each peak is said to be one of the dragon's scales. On certain festival days, locals still climb specific peaks to offer prayers for good harvests and family health, believing the spirit of the stone dragon still watches over the land. Children are told never to whistle in the mountains. It is said to awaken the dragon's anger, which may cause sudden storms or landslides. These stories, far from being dismissed as mere folklore, are woven into daily life. They give Wanshan a voice, a sentience that seems almost justified when you see how alive the landscape appears. Ecologically, the Wanshan region is a biodiversity hotspot, particularly in its cave systems and moist valley microclimates. Rare species of orchids, ferns, and mosses flourish in the shadowed crevices, and endemic amphibians like the Guizhou fire-bellied newt inhabit the streams. In higher and more remote ridges, elusive animals such as clouded leopards and Asiatic black bears have been occasionally spotted, though their numbers have dwindled. More commonly seen are langurs, wild boar, and an astonishing variety of birds, including hornbills, barbets, and the iridescent sunbird, which flits among flowering shrubs like a flying jewel. In recent years, the Wanshan National Geopark has been established to protect and promote the area's unique geological and cultural features. Fortunately, much of the region remains rugged and difficult to access, which has limited overdevelopment. Visitors who do make the journey usually base themselves in the nearby town of Tongren or explore the more accessible limestone spires on the park's perimeter. But the heart of Wanshan lies further in those places where trails become goat paths, where the sky disappears behind stone walls, and where the only sound is the slow drip of water echoing in the shadow of stone gods. And here lies the unreality of Mount Wanshan, not just in its fantastical shapes or mythic scale, but in its ability to unsettle your sense of time and space. The landscape seems sculpted by something deeper than geology, more primal than nature, as if the very emotions of the earth were solidified in stone. You walk among the peaks and feel small, yet strangely comforted. You look across the karst waves and feel as if you've stepped not just into another region, but into another dimension, one governed by mineral rhythm and timeless breath. This mountain range is not a single mountain at all, but a conversation of peaks, thousands of voices carved from silence, each speaking in the dialect of erosion and light. It does not impose meaning, but invites you to create it. It asks nothing but your attention. And for those willing to give that, Wanshan offers an experience that lingers, long after the last stone tower fades into the fog behind you. This video is for educational or entertainment purposes only, and information provided in the video may be incorrect. If you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing to the channel and like the video.